want to see. We all want to be real.
All right.
Hello.
All right.
All right, that
Finally.
sounds crispier.
Come together finally. Great.
Yes. All right. So I'm just making some final notes here. So, whatever was going on astrologically was pretty turbulent, which I think we saw the remainder of that within the next week.
Yeah.
And also I was in a real transition period with what I know to be going on, and how that's impacting and affecting us. And so I was actually still in the middle of that ingestion of knowledge. So now that I'm over that hump, and definitely I've stabilized more within the last 48 hours even, I think it'd be a good time to really come at this with a really clear picture of what everyone needs to know. And the real let's say foreground to the story of today, or the show of today, is just really to start cutting through a lot of the emotional aspects, and also just the tissue, just putting gloves on all the time when dealing with people about these situations, because time's definitely running out. And I like to keep people in a position to really have the leisure to some extent to ponder this and to make the decisions. But I also think at this point it's going to be an extreme injustice if we keep handling things that way this late in the game. Seeing that, I know you guys have been on for years now, and obviously I've been doing the message for years. And still, to me, the overall status of the community, not so much as the people that are just starting to figure out what we know, but the community at large, is really in disarray. And so I would really like to address some of the more prime suspects, if you may, and targets in this whole thing that we're dealing with when, getting ourselves free from Earth's dominion and the cabal. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were, you've done this great work with the Keymaker series, that we just wanted to kind of touch on and tell, oh man, what a huge work that is. Certainly something you want to go back to and re-listen, because it's just so packed with what you channeling, what you're coming up with. And that paired in that crazy year of 2016, where the energies are really off the charts, and it doesn't seem to stop, and everything is moving faster, including the matter. Now it's not just the thoughts, everything is catching up, matter and mental activity. And it's really coming to a cycle now where you either work with these energies, or you're lost at some point.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm super juiced up. Like I got that. I'm just really being more relaxed today, so I can transmit the message. But also, I got that super energized. So it's almost like I'm not using a lot of power, but I got a really high reserve. So that should be able to allow us to, really start piercing through, some of what I know people need to hear now, in light of what's going on right now, what's going on today. And just because people, if they're listening to this, it means that they need the pointer.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like at this point we've gotten even to a level where when we say, well, I listen to this person, or I follow this person, or this is my mentor, that's even now coming under criticism by the community. It's like, oh, you're not supposed to be following anybody, you're not supposed to be listening to anybody. And it's just like, it's getting overwhelming for a lot of people to grasp the oxymoronic, double-tongued, paradoxical aspect of the New Age movement and supposedly spiritual knowledge. So I think that what can really clear a lot of that up is just for people to be who they are. Because how they say, well, you need to be who you are. But what if you're this great being? And then what happens when people begin to feel threatened, and society begins to feel threatened by that great being? And in addition to that, I think that the freedom of speech is one thing, because it's more of like, okay, we'll give you this so we can take away something greater. Because the freedom of action is not allowed. So we get the freedom of speech so you could say whatever you want, but you can't do whatever you want. You can't go making changes, because that's when you're going to rub against, what you've been talking about. So in this, I want to talk about a lot of those double binds, like, you kind of jump out of the frying pan into the fire. People stop believing in one thing, but then start believing in something that's still directly tied into the same thing they stopped believing, but a little bit more intense. So those kind of things. So I'm looking to definitely drive around. I've kind of started my recording even since, we got on the phone, so we can even, use some of this as the beginning, because I'm sure people are going to know, how do we launch off?
Yeah.
But, traditionally, I guess we can, do whatever you want to do to open up the show.
I've been recording too.
Okay.
But let's just do a formal welcome, Sevan, to our next
Sure.
show. This is our third time together now?
Fourth.
Fourth time,
Uh-huh.
which is great. This has been such an energetic year for every one of us. We're really coming together here now and seeing it evolve in a way where, wow, it's going so fast, and it's really if you put your mind to the matter, it's manifesting in such a fast way. We've seen you with your key maker series, which is an awesome pile of work. Definitely we'll go back and re-listen some of those, packed with knowledge and very applicable kind of thought, mental stuff that really makes you scratch your head but nod at the end of it. And it's great to have you on again. And we'll let you go and present your first start here of the show, and go from there. We have a few questions, but we really want to take the time and just let it flow. And wow, great to have you back
Well,
on.
it's always great to be on. Obviously, I'm looking to share, and I always love sharing, especially with you too, because it's just the intentions. Because we talked about this a long time ago, but whatever you become and whatever you are is going to reflect in what you do, and the synergy that we have is really something to where we put our energies together and we create something different that's far greater than we could ever be by ourselves. And so I find that when I do get on Opthink, that happens. And of course, now I've gotten to the point where I always want to keep on that standard. So anything that we, is not somehow a part of that, I'm like, scratch it, let's go back again. So that's kind of what happened in our lost archive, which will come out, 10, 20 years from now. It'll be maybe more interesting than it would be then. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely great to be on. I actually haven't done a show in a while, so people are asking me, what's up. Next week, I have a retreat that's starting here in Costa Rica, and so I've been preparing for that. And then semester 2 is started, actually going to start in June, so that'll be semester 2 of the Innerversity. Obviously, semester 1 was a knock out of the park, just like the Keymaker series. Everyone enjoyed it. It's a different format, and that's generally what I attempt to do. Is I work with these different formats to see which one is really going to be more or less the best way to get the message across to people. But what I find is that different formats work in different ways for different kind of people. So it's not really narrowing it down, but it does give, for the person who's maybe more structural oriented, especially with the Innerversity, it gives them another method to, like, okay, we're drilling into this topic and we're going to exhaust this topic and then we're going to move on, versus, sometimes my conversations can be a synergy within themselves, mixing in several topics to show the connection. But in certain people, because they don't function that way, that can tend to be a bit confusing for them. And then in other aspects, there's kind of practical knowledge. I call it life, just what you deal with everyday life, happiness, and diet and those kind of things. And I feel like that's a necessary part of what goes on with the ascension process, because if you're just into studying the occult and conspiracy, you actually flood your consciousness with a rather dark energy. And it's just saying it as it is. I know a lot of people are searching this knowledge and information with great intent. They want to help others. They want to find out the secrets, but we have to call it like it is. When you read something about, mass genocide or, entities from another realm that are diabolical, and you start to process that in your consciousness, no matter how much of a let's say, light being, if you may, that you are, you still now have opened the door to a darker energy. So it's necessary that be balanced out. I'm not telling a person at all to stop doing that, but I'm saying don't let it pull you into a point where you're completely isolated from society. Now it's kind of got you backed in the corner, you start feeling like you can't even get out of the house, that nobody's vibing with you, and that everyone's a part of it. And then, pretty much it's a doomsday for that kind of individual. So thus, whatever the purpose of that kind of work would be on a negative aspect, it's now achieving that purpose with you. So I find that to be one of the things that the depths neophytes and initiates alike need to keep aware of at all times, is maintaining this balance, because it is important and it's going to affect you primarily. And the other thing is for people to realize, because sometimes we can get on this somewhat of a save the world program. We talked about that a long time ago, but it's really in the tense to where when somebody says something to you or does something that you don't like in the overall conscious community, then this severely impacts your ability to keep delivering the message. You start to question whether or not you should even be delivering the message after all these people. And that's generally what the conversations go like. These people, they don't even seem like they want it or deserve it or whatever. But the truth is, we have to realize where this is standing with us. This is not about everyone else. Primarily, this is about you. This whole process of learning information and distributing knowledge to others and assisting others with compassion is actually all about self, because it shows you what you're really about. Are you willing to make the actions? Are you willing to stand behind your word? And especially if in the past, if you have a history of just doing stuff for the college, or, working out at the gym, just nothing to do with spirituality and consciousness, you still have to put some work in. So I advise people to start thinking at times when they're melting down over the overall attitude of the communities at large. But hey, remember, this is still about you. This is about you creating that legend, because in every aspect, if you learn how to motivate yourself, then you never really have to worry about yourself letting you down. But if you start hinging a lot of this on how people respond to you, and it's like a two-edged sword, because people can send you, oh, thanks, and I love the thing that you're doing and what you did last week, and then you can also bite like a fish onto that hook and say, start feeding into that, and oh yes, yeah, and oh, I'm doing great, yes, and I'm glad you're thanking me, and blah blah blah. And then as soon as you kind of get into that, then there also could be that next message, I think you're totally an idiot. And that tends to affect the person more that's kind of been on the rope of, patting themselves on the back. Because even at this point, I was telling someone about this yesterday, but at this point, for us to at all give ourselves any kudos or congratulations about anything that we've accomplished as far as consciousness, it'd be more like celebrating in the first quarter of a game as if we won. Yeah. This is just really beginning. There's a lot that people need to learn. And also, we're literally, just like they tell you, you come in as a neophyte, and a lot of people think that, they're coming in as an adept. Maybe they've used ayahuasca one time and now they're a shaman or something like that. But it doesn't afford that kind of buffoonery. It's really where you come in as a neophyte. So there's plenty of things that you're going to need to learn. And also, just because our culture and in the brainwashing and things has treated us like children in every aspect, and tried to take care of us even if we're 50, 60 years old, rather than letting us self-substantiate and figure out what's going on for ourselves mentally, spiritually, physically, then what this actually leads to is it leads to quite a bit of you can't handle the truth, meaning that there's quite a bit of information that we need to ingest and come to truth in terms with, so that we can make that transformation. And so at the end of the day, or the beginning, depending upon how you look at it, we have to begin to realize that some people are here to give us that information. I'm one of them, you're one of them, and both of you are, I guess both of you are one of them. That makes a lot of sense. So what I'm saying is that there's people out there that need to begin to believe that there are others who, while someone may be a good woodworker, and someone may be a good mechanic, and some people are even, they're great at the computer, people are really good at spirituality. And what happens is, if we just jump into this acting like everyone's great at spirituality, just because we're like, well, we all have spirits. Well, we all have cars. So just because we have a car, it doesn't mean that we're all mechanics. So in every aspect, we have to realize that we need to begin to listen to those elders. You can go back to Alan Watts' recordings and listen to what's really being presented, and also look at the time frames, being the fly on the wall in a sense to look what was happening 15, 20 years ago and compare it to what's going on now. And then really see, have we progressed? Have we declined? Are we still where we were before? You know, what were the pros and the cons? What were the pitfalls? Because if you're still in this for your expansion and your ascension, you would need to gauge something like that. Because, and this is something that, you know, we all have to realize, that my day will come, your day will come. When you're dealing in these kind of matrices, you're really, when you get to an exalted level of your own spiritual consciousness, you start realizing that obviously your advent out of here is still your progress into a much more greater expanse called the afterlife. So in that case, though, it still gives you a certain amount of time. That's what Earth is really about. It's based on symbolism of time. And in this process of time, time will run out. So at this point, we do have the time now. That's why they say the time is now. We can't call the hands of time until we gain the ability to begin to predict our future. But as of now, we only can distill this moment and make the best of it. Because of course, you know, people got plans for next week, people got plans for 5 years, but nothing is guaranteeing those plans except for their belief that that time will come. And I'm sure there's many people who thought that that time was going to come in the future for them for something that they had planned, and they never made it to that point. So that's a part of adepthood, because you begin to accept those kind of things, and then that empowers you and quickens you right now. So everything that may seem to come across as negative at first always has a very potent fuel attached to it. Like I find sometimes when I'm in the meditations, and for a moment I may see something that looks strange, there's this immediate rush of fear. It only lasts like seconds, but it kind of changes the heartbeat and changes. You can feel even the fluid changes, because you could feel the adrenaline come through. And as a master meditator, you know to breathe that energy up, because that energy right there is actually equivalent to possibly 100 to 200 breaths for a person who is just in there in the relaxed, tranquil state and hasn't mixed the fluids, serotonin, melatonin, adrenaline, and those kind of things in the spine yet, because they're still working their way up the ladder. So again, just more proof that whatever it is that's out there that we may fear or may disturb us in one way or another, as adepts, we have to be willing to confront that, because in that there is some power. Not that we're going to go worship it, not that it's going to bestow some power upon us, but that our sheer ability to confront it is going to place us in the position that we need to be in to get ready to deal with the truth of the matter. And so, I think that that's a really good beginning. Also, I did want to say that, well, yeah, we can start it right there, because, that's really what this is about. This is about, are we really unified or not? Because I don't see unity in the conscious community. Actually, what I see is a lot of gossip. I see a lot of emotional games. And quite frankly, I see a lot of children playing with spirituality under its new wrap of, eating, eating the right way, and, just all the little prototypes that are and stereotypes that go along with the conscious community. But spirituality, once again, is what this is actually really about. And spirituality gets us into identifying the profiles of still what's not seen. Because I'll say this, and then I'll take a brief pause. The power of what we're up against is primarily concentrated in its ability to be invisible. It is very real, but it operates outside of the spectrum of normal vision. It can be sensed, but it's oftentimes not easily explained to those who seeing is believing, since they can't put their eyes on it, and it's been rather evasive in that nature. But it is very real. So for people who have seen that, even if it's just for a moment, or have been around others who have gotten themselves headlong into something that they thought was kind of like a game at first, and then now it's taken them, it's an ode or a testament to that there's something going on behind the scenes that actually equals all of the savagery and pestilence and injustice that's still going on. And just as Westerners, because people who have adapted the Western mindset, because we're not experiencing that in real time, well, we're experiencing it, but we're not experiencing it to the degree that we feel like is warranted for us to have a reaction. And I'll say it that way because if you're born into some kind of crazy situation anyway, you may never know the difference. It's like let's say a baboon in the zoo, just born in the zoo, is never going to know about the wild anyway. So thus just the standard things that go on in the zoo is like everyday life. So this is how it could be for us even in our Western culture where we're subjected to all this brainwashing and all these different things. And we're like, yeah, it's not as bad as Gaza. But why are we comparing two rather dismal situations? It's like we would first have to see, well, what was it really like when none of this stuff was going on, and how were we then to really base exactly how difficult it is for us now to thrive?
I really liked when you said, and I'm just going to take a minute to draw this picture here. We've thought about this a little bit, and you're bringing it right up. Wonderful. When you said, people have been starting to go into that space and start to meditate, but it's not mixing the fluids. It's not bringing that mixture up. It's not releasing it. It's not expanding and relieving and spreading it out. We're in a state where we're still compressing and preserving and keeping these feelings down low, even though we've poured it into the soup. We're all like tasting the soup. But there's one picture that we saw, and that is kind of explanatory to that. If you look at the Giza power plant, if you look at the Giza pyramid, and at the blueprint from the side, we see that the light goes into these shafts, and they're at the angle, and they meet in the middle. Okay, everybody's seen that picture, or many, and then take that and hold it against the Pink Floyd cover where the prism breaks into the seven rays, right? But that light there on the Pink Floyd cover is not coming from above. That comes from below and breaks down below. And that is exactly what you were talking. We're preserving it. We're keeping it down. We're compressing it. We're not going through this depression just yet one-on-one, where we have to, build it up in our own power plant, go through the depression, which means expanding. When something depresses, it expands. We grow into that and mix it then with the light that, light comes from above. So that angle in the pyramid is the right one. And for some strange reason, the Pink Floyd cover shows it, from the bottom back to the bottom. And that is, it's obviously the angle it falls in, and gives us the chance to depress that.
Yeah, and it's just because, there's a lot of cryptic references to, I think the pentagram in itself is the most primary cryptic message that behind the scenes that you're dealing with sorcery. And it's really because we have to look at in history, especially with the engagement of the British, and just the whole idea of dominating other cultures, that what you're looking at is you're looking at an ideology and a mindset that's willing to take upon anything to dominate another person, just like what we've seen in the Nazi regime, like anything, whether it's paranormal, whether it's one-waff wonder weapons, whether it's bombs, nuclear bombs, whatever that can be enlisted to bring about this world domination. So obviously that kind of mindset would be very vulnerable to anything of what we would call a dark or imbalanced or distorted nature. And the reality is that what we find is we find a moment in time to where humanity had got a reboot in a sense. And after that reboot, there was a long process of wholeness, because there was a direct memory of, so last time when we started having our differences, it led to the entire destruction of our world, because we are the world. You don't got to be Michael Jackson to know that. So when we destroy ourselves and we have differences amongst each other, then we're going to throw off the balance. That's like, of course, 101 spirituality, but it gets a lot deeper, because what we find is that when we study this knowledge, because I think today we'll get into a little bit about the difference between hermetics versus alchemy. And of course, now those two topics are almost like synonymous with one another, but in history, they actually weren't. And this is, of course, where we kind of would need to do more reading than listening at times, because you'll find few people educated about those different levels of knowledge in those different sects, even Gnosticism. Like, we actually say these words and we have a generalized determination of what they mean based on what someone told us. But if we went back and we seen Pythagoras, we see Simon the Magus, and we see Apollonius of Tyana, and we see these magicians even of the day, or sorcerers of that day, then we get a different picture of what we believe, let's say something like Gnosticism is, based on what it's been interpreted to us as now. So what happens though is that all this it becomes very simple, because the greatest power that one could ever really possess, and we have to understand that even these controlling factions are very well of this. We're very well aware of this. It's balance. And it's interesting because when you understand the definition of balance, it's not good and it's not bad. Bad and good are their own respective poles. Balance is something entirely different that we grow to learn and begin to define as we become more mature. Because obviously one who's just judging all the time doesn't really come into any real knowledge, because they cut themselves off every time they make a judgment. When they make a judgment, then they are judged. It steers the consciousness of the person judging within itself. So the truth is that we have to look at something simple, that even, and I guess it's the British's day, but when you have cultures, and this is why a lot of this, the root of it still is spirituality. It's still the quarrels that were brought about through the different cultural beliefs. Even, let's say, in Islam and Hinduism, the difference between these cultures, and when these people had to share the same space, in this space, let's say, is united India, then there was a huge breakdown because the Sikhs, the Muslims, and the Hindus couldn't get along from their cultural level. And it began to erode the kingdom. And then at a certain point, you find one who's very aware of balance. And just let me show you how this works, because we are so naive at times in interpreting everything as, is it good or bad? It's like the flaw in our brain, because it always defaults to wanting to put things in one category or another category, good or bad. But what happens is that then the British move in, operating under the laws of balance, and say, we're going to be the mediators between all of you. We're going to give you the rule, because think about what balance is. It's actually when you look at scales, it's that middle point, that rule, that straight line that now is going to be there to allow the other two sides to teeter-totter, but still balance themselves out at some point.
Yeah,
justice, so you can, right? So you can then see how something that we would perceive as good, like, okay, once I achieve balance, then now it's in. It's like you got to go further in your thinking. Balance is a tool in itself. If someone comes in with it and you have 2, 3, 4, 5 warring factions, and something knows how to come in and instill balance through the power, because balance is more powerful than positive or negative or one side or another or differences, then they will rule. So we see that happen in India and Pakistan. We saw that happen in Mesoamerica with the tribes fighting the Aztec, the Teotihuacan, and all those different places. We saw in North America the Indian tribes, or the Native American tribes, going to war with each other, the Blackfoot Indians and the Cherokees. We've seen this in Africa, or Akibulan, where you've seen the tribes of the Zulu begin to war with the Ashanti. Like, you start seeing that when we start having all these differences, and when we're not unified, then we set ourselves up for an external power to come in that's just waiting for us to begin to enact that whole process of differences, so that it can come and then become our ruler. And how this is happening, because this is happening now in the conscious community. So when you study history enough, you can see the new thing, being affected by the old thing. Because in the conscious community, because everyone's so divided about And let's see whether we should be vegetarians or whether we should not, or whether this guy's really a Mason or whether he's really not, and maybe he's lying. And, again, there's all this gossiping going on. This person believes you shouldn't be using names, but now you're using names. So now they want to take their community away from where you are because you're wrong. So then what moves in is a force like Baphomet, because then that becomes the ruling force that says, oh, but here's the rules. And I'm going to bring this balance. And then some people are thinking, well, isn't that a good thing? See, that's the trick. That's the programming. The mind defaults to say, was that good or bad? But time is going to go on and things are going to play out. And you're going to see a back and forth volley. So it's not good or bad. What you're going to have is you're going to have a new system that attempts to emerge in, acting as the balancing component between people's spirituality and those that are hungry. Because remember, I've seen a lot of people that they're still so hungry for this internet fame. They've only bought it into the spiritual arena, that when they're really propositioned with the mindset of the same thing that we pledge to get ourselves out of, then they begin to adapt that. If they're told for one moment that, hey, you're the one that's supposed to be in power, they call it the Messiah complex, then they will adapt the same thing that supposedly years ago that they said that we didn't need to do. So what I'm advising people to do is to start thinking of yourself in a nucleus and what kind of energy you're sending out and what you're doing, because that's where it stops. Like I was thinking about this word gossip today. I said, that's funny because it's like gossiping. Now, I try to keep my etymology and breakdowns of words really exact, because I get people who email me with some wild stuff and I'm like, yes, but no. I mean, we kind of want more structure around what you just, synchronized. But, so this is an example of one. But in every extent, if it's like an analogy to help us remember something, because I do that sometime when I'm trying to remember something. I'll say, okay, well, this number is associated with like the last two numbers of my date of birth. So I'll always remember that number if I'm asked again. So you can associate things with other things to remember them. So gossiping, I call gossiping, because what you get is you get these invisible forces who are just aware of, who are more aware of who's who and what's what and who's going to be making changes in the future than even those people are. And then they're constantly attempting to cause that confusion between all of those people. And it keeps up and it keeps going and it keeps us divided. So that's the beginning of the conversation today, is the big question of, are we unified? And because we're not, what is that ultimately going to equal for the community at large that is attempting to expand in this realm of spirituality, when we're dealing with entities, which we call spirits, that are actually invisible to the naked eye, but operate in the person's consciousness? And have we firewalled our consciousness so that way when that urge comes along to cause some kind of dissension or to find some kind of difference between one thing and another, rather than finding the unifying components, or even, really doing the work in working on bringing the connection, like if you find a difference in something that someone believes and it's just completely out of line, I'm sure if you go to that person and say, hey, here's some information that I found and here's my own experience with what you're talking about, and I find it to be a little bit different than what you're talking about, that's love. You see what I mean? Like if you're going to talk to somebody and you really want to help them, not you want to make them feel that you're more powerful than them. I always get people telling me, well, I know a person who has more experience than you. This is still like, my dad can beat your dad, and that kind of aspect of looking at this, because it's not about who's greater and who's smaller. It's about whether we're going to make it out. Yeah. Because all of the playing, all the back and forth volleying going on, it's gotten nowhere. It's been 5 years now. If we were set out to do what we said we're going to do, we would start seeing major changes now, not awakening people to information of things that they can do nothing about. I can't do anything about a flat earth. You see what I mean? I can change my consciousness. I can change where I'm at in that whole aspect of things, where I'm at in my being. But I can't do anything about the military industrial complex. You see what I mean? Like if I want to go down there and march and tell them they need to shut that down. You see what I mean? Or if I do, I probably will spend my whole life trying to do just that, maybe to get one base closed down. And at the end of the day, 5 more will pop up. So we have to ask ourselves, are we really working at the level that we should be working? Are we beating our heads against the physical reality? Because that's what they call a materialist. Even a person who's looking to manifest some kind of spiritual phenomena into the physical reality was known in the times of the let's say the greats, the Therians, as a materialist, because you're still looking to make something happen and manifest within the physical world, which even a lot of people get into the astrology, they get into sorcery, they get into magic, they get into manifestations to make things happen in the physical world. And again, there's nothing right, nothing wrong about this. This is the easiest way to be balanced. There's nothing right, nothing wrong about it. I'm just observing the whole phenomena. But the truth is, how do we progress beyond the physical plane? Because that's where we're going. Like if we have to research what we're supposed to be doing next, then it would be when we're entering into that non-physical, that non-corporeal. What are the mechanics and what are we going to be encountering there? And is there any hints here that give us more of an idea of what that may be? And of course, the answer is yes. So what I got here is, it depends on if there's any more questions. I really wanted to run over really briefly. And this is going to be a bit rough. It's going to be like a rough draft. But you remember, I got to try this out on somebody, meaning that it's got to come out and then it's going to get smoother and smoother as it keeps coming out. It's core truths, but it's so difficult to get your arms around, trying to translate it. Let's just see what happens. I can't say it's going to be a bad translation now, but I'm giving a disclaimer that I got to explain something that is a little bit more difficult to explain than the last thing, if that's possible. And that's just, of course, if we're ready to go into that, because I think that at this point, we're really going to need to get on the same page about history and herstory, right? Because there's something that we start to begin to realize right away. And it's that when you start studying the past, and there's a lot of manipulation that goes on just between the two components of the male and the female. Because there's always an agenda to make one seem to be worse than the other. There's the judging. And in the observation, what you start to find is that if we just put polarity labels on it, a female would be a plus and a minus, and a male would, let's say, be a minus and a plus. But both of them would contain both aspects of what we would perceive as male and female. But the issue is, if we perceive female as negative and male as positive, as the Indo-European cultures did when they usurped the matriarchal societies, then we get into this whole weird conundrum, because we start to interpret people, live human beings, in the aspect in which they're not cast in. They're not just negative and they're not just positive. They both contain both poles. And in fact, the only ones which we'll find are the ancient ancestors that truly were able to embody that positive negative pole without showing a gender difference in the physical realities were the first ones, also known as the androgynes. That when you look at the cultures in every secret society, and you understand how to interpret those words that are being mentioned in the history that's even on the walls, what they're attempting to explain is that the androgynon, you can even say a 10, a 1 and a 0, a being that has a 1 and a 0, actually became what was known as the lost word. That's why I say in the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God. So they're saying that the word is actually a being. So when they say the word is lost, that means that somehow these beings no longer come back into the physical reality as much. Now you don't see any real androgynes coming out. And this is because there's an imbalance going on within our own system. Because just from a chemical level alone, the androgen would contain an equal balance of all those chemicals. When a person comes out as male or comes out as female, for what we call male and female, then they're exhibiting a slight imbalance. It's like why we use our left hand or why we use our right hand. Some people are more partial to one partial to the other. There's an imbalance. So it was already known that the original balance was actually achieved within one specific being. And this comes off in Judaism as the Cadman. It comes off in Hinduism as Adonari. It comes off in Hermeticism as Hermes, the hermaphrodite. It comes off in Venusian knowledge as Aphrodite. It's in all of these cultures that the first physical perfect form is androgynous, not a male or not a female. But what we also have to pay attention to is just what we're dealing with now with this advent of celestial energy. Well, it's not even an advent. It didn't just start. It's always been going on, but it definitely seems like it's intensifying because we're getting closer and closer, and because we're breaking down the wall between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead. The actual confusion that we have about what goes on in afterlife, even with us, we're starting to chip that down and start to realize more about reincarnation. And, we're plugging at it. We may not be completely exact, but we're at least now starting to realize that there's something going on beyond this. And so what this brings us to then is it brings us to a point where we realize that these systems like planets work in cycles. So if the big argument is what came first, the chicken or the egg, because that's actually what it starts boiling down to after a while, in the first thought of your consciousness, what you have that came first is an androgen. And in its coming into physical reality, it still can be perceived more as a female because it has a womb. And that's how we started to associate the first androgynon with being primarily female, but also containing a male component, having the ability to generate on its own, which they call parthogenic or parthegenesis. So what we also witness with this, because this is a major key point to everything that you're ever going to see in occultism, everything you're going to see in movies, everything you're going to see everywhere, is this hidden war that's going on, because that initial androgynous being containing a womb was also vying for its position when it began to produce more life, meaning as more physical life forms came out, you had these male or female polarized entities coming out. And when we pull away all the money and all the distractions and all these different things that are put in front of us now as being valuable, when you're talking now, you're ancient now you're up there's writing on the wall, hieroglyphs, there's big pyramids, there's, folks floating around, there's vimanas, there's dorje rods. When you put yourself back in that setting, the only thing that's really of power is having the ability to continuously come into these realms. And that's actually what even the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead really entail, is actually how to maintain a body in the spirit, in the physical reality forever. That's why there was so much time and attention and put into the embalming process and keeping the body preserved. So that way, when the spirit left for that moment, it could return back to that body and reanimate that body. So the only other way then beyond that to get back into the physical reality was to come through the woman's womb. And so that also was significant to the power, that there was power in that womb. So this is why later on you start to see, and Jung talks about this, especially the Indo-European patriarchal mindset become extremely threatened by this womb, because to them, it's the key to getting in and out of physical realities. It's the key to immortality. And because the male doesn't have one, then an agenda launch for the male to actually get one. And this is what you start seeing in science. Actually, it goes as old as Akhenaten. It's even older than that. But the process of it's embodied within the Church of Christ today, where Christ is the male, but the church is the female. The wound in the side of Christ is really his vagina. One is to suckle from the wound to sustain themselves. And, you see in the literature, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of James, you begin to see in the literature the actual, even statements like, if a woman is to enter into the kingdom, she must first become a male. You start seeing the stuff that they moved away because they were like, if we show them the true art of sorcery, because that's what this stuff starts getting into, then they're going to know we're sorcerers. So we just want to keep some of these watered down books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we want to get rid of Thomas. We want to get rid of James. We want to get rid of the Apocryphon. We want to get rid of these books because it reveals the identity of what we're doing, how we're going to basically replace Mary. And that's why every Mary in the Bible is actually speaking of the same person. There's not Mary Magdalene and the Mary the whore and the Mary this. They're giving you the aspects, all the aspects of what they perceive about the divine feminine. And in this, even in the text, as it says, they're going to attempt to make Mary male and then allow Jesus to surround Mary and become the new kingdom. And then Mary would just exist within that kingdom. And sure enough, just as we see in Christianity, Mary is not the centralized figure. Jesus is. But even deeper than that, you know that this is happening because, especially in the Kabbals, because, that's funny, every time you see a male take on a position of power in the world, they always have to take on the feminine attributes. They must put on the dress. For a judge, it's the robe.
Yeah.
For the Mason, it's the apron, right? And then they must put on the wig. That's Parliament. And if you really start looking at it, it's like a long list of things that they do in order to take on or actually try to usurp the role of the divine feminine. And it's because the first systems of knowledge, which is the knowledge of Ma'at, that was ever on the planet was about the planet, the cosmos. It was mainly about the planet, the moon, and the sun. Just what you can see, like the little stars, that was like extracurricular knowledge. That was when you really graduated and you could actually project yourself to figure out what was going on. The largest celestial bodies were the primary bodies studied. And so through that knowledge, through the knowledge of Ma'at, which is alchemy means the blackness. Al means the, Kimi means black, the study of blackness. It's why we get chemistry, mystery. All these words all say the same thing, the study of blackness, because it's a knowledge that's purveying everything, that we come from that womb. We come from that darkness into light. So if we need to try to understand anything, then we need to study darkness. We need to study chemistry. We need to study mysteries. And when we come into English with that, though, and this is where we got to realize the play, Medunetter has 2,000 letters. English has 26, in a hidden 26. So if you're trying to explain attainments of the higher realms, you need a language that you can read up, down, left, right, right to left, and down and up, which hieroglyphs you can. And each way you read it renders you the explanation based on the direction in which your consciousness is going. So if you're going in the logical direction, whatever you're reading is going to give you the logical definition of that. If you read it from bottom to top, you're going to get the ascension or futuristic version of what you're reading. So this allows you to make sure that you don't come into any misunderstandings. And it also allows you to read something in balance. Versus, and many people don't know that, versus in English, you're going one direction, which is the logical side of the mind and also the way of death. The way we read English, look, write a word and notice you read it from left to right. Now look at the clock and notice you watch time move from left to right. Now then ask yourself, if it's 2016 now, but for someone who was living 3,000 years ago, were they counting time down? Like, that's how they put it, right? Like during Julius Caesar's time and, around those times, they were counting time down. They were like 500, 499, 498, 490, right? So what, just in that alone, what does that do for your consciousness? Instead of counting up like I'm getting older, you're counting down like I'm getting younger.
Yeah.
Huh.
And then on top of that, right? What are we counting down to? Because, if you're just in there and you're like, hey, guys, what are we counting down to, guys? Because what's going to happen at zero, right? So, but what did they tell us happened at zero? That's the difference between AD and DC, right?
Yeah.
But surely we can't believe that it's just narrowed down to this mythological Christ myth, which is actually more of a title than it is actually a person. But it does give us a hint to what's actually happening, that Julius Caesar and Jesus Christ, and even John Carter, if you watch the movie for that matter, is actually codes for the process of this idea that the masculine is actually going to take over the world. The king, the masculine king, which you can't say it's a divine masculine. So this is the other thing. I don't want to skip over things here, but let me just put a quick note here. You have to realize that when I also identify that everyone has a positive and negative inside of them, you can say that one is the divine feminine and one is the undivine feminine. One is the divine masculine and the other one's the undivine masculine. Now, every person has within themselves that distorted, ignorant side that you need to bring light to. So some people in history have become the total embodiment of that ignorant, dark side and have chose to exist and live just as that. So these are very important points because we start realizing that many individuals come off balance quite some time ago and begin to utilize this knowledge that was coming from Alexandria. Really, it came out of Kemet. And if you remember, Kemet in Egypt is not too far away. Alexandria is a hop, skip, and jump. And what you see take place is that all of the people who are the founders of the secret societies that have dwelt for thousands of years, the sorcerers mainly, which are the names you should remember, Pythagoras, Apollonius of Tyana, Simon Magus, and a few other people that I'm going to end up mentioning during this conversation. But these are cults of sorcerers that are taking the knowledge of Ma'at, the Divine Mother, and then conscrewing it into their hermaphroditic religion of inversion, which now comes out as Baphomet. I guess it's a goat. See, the thing is that some people try to interpret the symbol and explain the symbol as balance and explain the symbol as having all these deep hidden meanings. But that may be true. But there's no way, and excuse my French, that a goat with titties is going to come across to a neophyte as anything that they're going to be able to gain a lot of knowledge from. They're going to be so conscrewed because of the imagery itself, they're not going to be able to bring forth any positive thoughts. They're going to think that all this mystery and all these traditions have to do with something that is evil. And that's what I meant to bring up when I was talking about the language. See, in English, our word for negative and evil and even dark all seem to run together. And this is a part of our problem.
Yeah.
Right? Because negative is also the same thing on the battery when we have to have two poles, right?
Yep.
And then darkness is something that happens at night, but is not necessarily a bad thing either. But now evil is a distortion and a retardation that comes about because of a defunct language. So that sounds like more of what we're talking about when we at times can conscrew the word negative for evil. So we have to, in this conversation at least, remember when I'm saying darkness, because then I'm just talking about the other component to light, versus when I'm talking about evil, which is what's brought about through the ignorance and the distortion of languages and thought processes,
Right.
and all of the activities that go on that one may engage in that corrupts them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's
so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
To bring up or to get clear on.
Yeah. There's another word that absolutely fits with our stuff here, and that's the Sha words, the shadow and the shaman, which the she-man, the shadow, is definitely the dark aspect. If you look where shaman comes from, was I think a Dutch younger guy that went to today Russia, up there Siberia, and he saw those women do their magic, and that they must have had a pact with the devil. 18-year Dutch Christian guy that wants to learn about language, got scared and ran back and called them the shamans, supposedly. But there's more to it. But yeah, those words, the shadow side of it, we all have them, always with us.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that we can never get under the impression that studying any of this stuff that we call spirituality is just going to be all butterflies, unicorns, and rainbows. which happens. We've gotten to a point where we feel like that if we're studying this knowledge and we found the right knowledge, then it's actually supposed to accompany something that's very fluffy and lovely. And that's our own interpretation. What this is really getting into is it's getting into the operations and the mechanics of how worlds are built and how spirits are what they call the transmigration of souls, the balancing of the world, or actually in this case, the transmigration of spirits. You can't even have an identity for what's called the soul because it's nameless. It doesn't fit into any conformity. And that's actually what is allowing us to keep going and have this perpetual existence, because nobody has figured it out. Because just like I was saying before, it's just like the male who has this, this woman he meets and he's totally enamored by her. But the more that he learns about her and the more time that he spends with her and the more that he gets from her, the moment that he thinks that he has her figured out, then he becomes disenchanted. And now he wants to go and find something else that stirs that whole thing up for him again. And that's an instinct. We need to think about this. We do this all the time. We do it with even other objects, toys, electronics, our job. At first, it's like, man, this is going to get me somewhere. And then, 4 weeks later, it's like, oh my goodness, I need to find another job. So what happened? One became disenchanted. So the thing is, you can never become disenchanted by the soul, and thus it can never be identified. Those two run hand in hand. That's why when they try to find this whole God particle and all that, it still drives them nuts because they have all the other particles. They have different things that attract and repel. These are sorcerers. They're hermetics. So hermetics studies alchemy, but more from the aspect of poisons and different things that are actually going to take away or subdue an individual. And it's very clear. The difference between a sorcerer versus someone like, let's say, a medicine woman is one is in service to the people. The medicine woman spends all of her time giving these medicines and making these herbs and things to heal. The sorcerer wants to be served. So all these kings then, and this is what people need to realize, all these kings, all these presidents are sorcerers. I don't care how strong their craft is or how weak their craft is, they still fall under that definition because they want someone to serve them. And that becomes a simple manipulation of energy on the astral plane to where the person's energy, rather than recycling with their higher self, which is basically left them here as a seed to grow up and continues to resonate as a connection until they do so, is being interrupted by something who wants to siphon and funnel that energy into itself. So we should be very clear about that. And then the other thing that we also should know is during the divine feminine cycles, everything is about pleasure and abundance. I'll say it again. During the divine feminine cycles, everything is about pleasure and abundance, because if you're on earth and the divine feminine cycle is in its climax, there's so much fruit, trees, singing, songs, dancing, curves, waving, vibrations, and happiness, and all of what you can embody the divine feminine as, because I think every male is familiar with the divine feminine. So all of those embodiments are what's really in play. So when you get these distorted masculine cycles, now it's scarcity, now it's money, now it's a challenge, now it's all of those things that we dislike the most, which is what's happening to our world now. So for me, it's not about jumping on one side or another. I'm just an observer. I can't jump on sides anymore. I already know that game. But I don't want to live in a world that lives on scarcity, because I see what it does to the organisms that live in it, and it's sad. You start to watch, I don't even got to explain it, but you start to watch that back and forth and that grinding go on, and the spite and the hatred. Now, remember also that what this causes, because I'm not saying that there's not a distorted feminine, which is the Lilithian force, or the Lilith. And that comes out more, though, and it's entertained. Like even, the horrible, I couldn't even watch but a couple minutes of it, but Beyonce put out a documentary called Lemonade that pretty much, if you ever had questions that they were in the cult or not, you definitely know now. And also in that, you see that their affiliation is with voodoo. And you also see that voodoo surrounds itself by a negative, dark queen, who is the embodiment of a woman when she is abused by the divine, or excuse me, the undivine and distorted masculine.
Yeah.
So I think everyone's run into a woman who's gotten out of a very bad relationship, and the man was at fault, and she was doing everything that she could, and then watched what she turned into after that. So because all these energies are very real, even for that woman, that energy starts to appeal to her, that distorted feminine. See, they're no good. See, they're trying to take everything away. But also remember that the goal here is not to go from one side to the other. The goal is to remember, before any of these cycles started, there was an androgen. It wasn't a male and it wasn't just a female, it was both. So the back and forth volley that we're dealing with now between the masculine and the feminine forces are being regulated, arbitrated, if you may, by these so-called powers that be. So as long as they can keep us in confusion about the exact identity of these primal forces, then we will forever believe that, oh, well, yeah, that's right. We need to overthrow this distorted masculine cycle so that we can get back to the divine feminine. That's not what I said. What I said is we need to get divine feminine and divine masculine in harmony. And only then will we really enjoy our stay on the physical planes. And when one starts to come into realizing that, then they work and they toil night and day in the field to bring that balance about. And that's actually what I'm engaged in. I'm engaged in unifying the field, not saying that, oh, well, it was better during this time or it was better during that time and I wish it could be back like that again. It's really about, well, what are we going to do with this now? And what we find is that also this is so easy to do, and it tends to, we do it naturally. We're naturally harmonic, just like a rainbow naturally appears up there. Nobody's got to do anything to show you all the spectrum of the rainbow. And in fact, let's desist for one brief moment to talk about what the rainbow really is and how you get all the symbolism and even all the text that's necessary as far as occult text about what the rainbow is. Because it's first stated by the God of the Bible, who clearly is part of this nefarious agenda, that let the rainbow be a sign of my covenant. Okay? So when we move that out of the mouth of the one who wants to try to steal all the power all the time, what we get said is that the rainbow is a sign of the agreement. Okay? So what agreement are we talking about? And sure enough, if we keep digging or even meditating, we'll find that every single aspect of the body, mainly the primary organs and the primary fluids, the primary glands, they all move in a certain number sequence, but they are drastically different from one another. But what they've done is they've somehow come into a synergy, which by definition means it's no longer what it was before, but it has become a collaboration of everything that was involved in order to create something better. So there's a synergy that takes place in order to create something that's greater. So what the rainbow is the rainbow is a sign of those colors, which cover the entire spectrum, coming together to become something greater. So this is the first thing. And watch, we'll show with with the symbol of the rainbow, we find the truth. Now also, when there's a transition between one color and another color, it doesn't just start. There's a fusion of those two colors that go on like a monitor. It's got millions of these fusions of colors and different shades of purple until it finally transcends into the next color. Those are the marriages. Those are the blending that goes on in order to create a bridge between one absolute, I'm red, and another absolute, I'm orange. And then we get this fusion of colors. So when we play that out in the physical realm, because as above, so below, what we find is, well, what is the whole purpose of this agreement? And this is what one just says when they're in the meditation about this whole thing. Well, what is the purpose of this agreement? It's to build a bridge. And sure enough, we find that the same design of the rainbow is actually the same design that most bridges are built in.
Yeah.
And it's for a reason. And they even call it Rainbow Bridge. But what are we talking about? A bridge to what? Well, it's a bridge from the world of the living to the world of the hereafter, which we need to stop calling the realm of the dead. And when that rainbow bridge is broken, now there's no connection between those two worlds. And that's also in the Norse mythology about them breaking the bridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then when you go on, what you find out is that we were responsible for keeping the connection between us and our ancestors. Now, I used to get confused about this, especially when I started. I was throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But to understand and connect with one's ancestors is no different than you connecting with your great grandma. And if you're not into doing that, it's because you've been brainwashed. If you won't take care of your parents when they're dead, if you won't go and visit your grandma when she's old, it's because you're out of balance. You're not even like what all of us used to be, because we knew what are we doing? We're making this connection between the realm of the living and the realm of the hereafter, so that way we can have immortality. True immortality, which is actually being conscious of your living. See, immortality is guaranteed for every being, but the definition of immortality actually means that you're conscious through the entire process. So that got a little confusing for me in the meditation. So I asked for a deeper explanation. And it says, okay, well, let's erase it all right now. And then let's just talk about your memories. Now, your memory. If you don't have memory, what do you have? Well, first of all, if I didn't have a memory, I would have never remembered to get on the phone today. I actually would have never remembered to get on the computer. Actually, what is a computer? Actually, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
You see, it all is nothing without memory. Memories are the only power.
Yeah.
You see, this is where we start drilling into it. Like, this is what I have to say to everyone today. Like, I don't care how long I'm going to be here. As long as I can get this across, then everything is already in the works for the benefit of humanity. Understand that your memory is your power. Because here's one advantage of having memory of your ancestors. You'll know not what to do again.
Yeah.
See, the ancestors beat their heads against the process of going through physical realities and what to do and what not to do in order to maintain the balance, which is that rainbow. And they learned that we all need to work together. And there can even be marriages between what we would think is two opposing forces, yellow and or red and blue. And then comes this synergy of even greater beauty. So we're having a great time. But if we break those connections, if we allow our differences, see, the differences is why I'm yellow and you're orange. But when someone says, well, everything should be yellow, it's like the movie The Giver. You start to see that that kind of consciousness is actually more malevolent than any kind of consciousness. Because what it produces is it produces one who can make actions and not even feel like there's anything wrong with what they're doing. Case in point, when the Muslims wanted to exterminate the Hindus, they did it in the worst ways, cutting people open, bellies, mothers, raping, the whole nine. But somehow that felt okay because, after all, these people were different and they weren't like them. So that gave them the feeling inside that they could do that. That's what happens when we start to disrespect the differences. Now, remember, I'm not talking about evil, because I found my message constantly being disturbed by evil attempting to assert that, yes, that also means evil too. We must come into balance with evil. No. Evil, you're in your own distorted world. You're not darkness. You're not the deep, dark purple. You're not blue-black. You see what I mean? You're something else. You're the distortion and the confusion that comes across when the bridge is broke. And that's why they explain to you, again, now when we go back to the occult lore, that Yaldabaoth, which is definitely it's called a tetragrammatis, a chimera. What it means is that in the attempt to formulate this male womb that I was telling you about, that there came forth a creation from this male womb, male aspect first, and that is the God of the Bible. That is the one that is in the whole. I mean, it's obviously anti-feminine in the Bible if you didn't check it. And in fact, when you really get the real books, it talks about circumcision is actually not just to cut the foreskin. Circumcision is to cut the entire penis. And then the man is to be made an eunuch, meaning that he's no longer to engage with women. Same thing with the Knights Templar. In their oaths of monkhood, and in most oaths of monkhood, by the way, you are never to engage with a woman again. The Knights Templar even went one more step. You couldn't kiss your mother or your sister. So what we're seeing is clearly what I'm explaining, that something is back there attempting to sever the two forces. Woman is then seen as negative and corruptible. Man is then seen as some type of even space being from the light and the sun god. You see what I mean? And then they got us over here believing in all this stuff and destroying ourselves through our beliefs. If there was anything truly right about it, I wouldn't even be on the phone today. I would be having a great time in our balanced world with our bridge. And then I would be connecting to my ancestors for thousands of years ago and not acting like I'm totally disassociated with them. I would know my history and I would know what all these herbs do, and I would have a communication with them rather than looking at them on the shelf all dehydrated. You see, so I know where the greater world is. I know what the better world is. No one has to convince me of that. I can't be convinced edgewise either. So what I'm saying is when we get true knowledge and true adepthood, it starts to reveal this to us through us. It starts to show us the same way we act now and the same things that we believe. This is the root to it. The root is because for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, there's been an agenda to enslave our every being through us being divided. Because in that, we can't have power. You're talking about a phenomenal cosmic power being split into so many different parts that none of those parts have an effect. It's almost like a person who's very powerful but trying to do too much. Hello, I'm one of them. I have so many responsibilities. My power is in speech. My power is in writing. I find myself trying to figure out who slipped a worm into the site and now is crashing. I find myself trying to figure out, what kind of camera that's needed that's going to stay on for more than 30 minutes. I find myself trying to figure out how we're going to generate more capital just to keep alive what we spent 6 years building. You see? So this is why one can then realize, because there's no power in division. And until people start coming together, then you don't have blue where red should be and yellow where pink should be. Everyone is at their stations and what they enjoy. And in the event, and this is what true, let's say we'll use the word magic today is, in the event that you're ready to make a transfer, then you already know what the diametric opposition of what you need to blend with in order to cause that transfer. Meaning, if you decide, well, now I want to go experience X, it's in the herb. There's an herb for it. There's a color for it. There's a crystal for it. There's a time of day for it. There's so many correspondences to whatever you're attempting to achieve, then it means that you're truly limitless. That's what this was. So don't let also these people convince you that Earth has always been a prison system. It wasn't built and designed that way.
Yeah.
What happened was the greed and the jealousy and the envy of the differences. See, because in the ancient culture, what they attempt to teach you first is how you're unique and how everything is created unique, to have a unique divine purpose, but all comes from the same source. That's rites of passage 101. You have to know what your uniqueness is, because when you find your uniqueness, that method in which you use to find it allows you to also teach others how to find their uniqueness. Now notice, you're not trying to teach them how to be like you. You just you flunked the course. After all, everything is unique. You're attempting to show them the core path, which is works for everyone of how to understand your uniqueness. And then also you are instilling within them that, but we all come from the same source. We have this unique divine purpose. Now, it of course reminds you then of even how the Mayan societies were run with them knowing what your purpose was, like what you were good at. And they put you into that faculty and that capacity. You know, Blue Snake Lightning, you know, he's good at climbing trees and bringing in these fruits, and then also generating energy of this special kind of force. You see, so each person has their unique ID. And this is each person then, because now we have to get real with this. Each person then being in themselves a part of the chain that is expanding across the abyss, that is allowing us not to fall in it. See, right now we're falling in the abyss. Our bridge is broken. So the uniqueness that made us all great is now actually becoming our Achilles heel, the more that we're taught that we should all be the same way. You see? So this is really important pointers today, because it gives some demarcations between, like I said, what is true uniqueness, what is evil versus darkness, what are these different components? Because if we don't know these and we take it for granted, then we're led astray. And there is enough of these entities, because remember what you're dealing with, and I'll rewind for one moment here. What you're dealing with in the Egyptian Book of the Dead is actually the instructions on how to maintain immortal on the physical plane. That's what the book was written for. And these people are not playing. We play, they don't play. This wasn't just fanciful for them. They figured out something. So why do you think it was so important, the Rosetta Stone, for the controllers that we're dealing with today? Because they didn't know what those prayers said. So they didn't know the method or the formula or the ingredient or the recipe to immortality. Now that they know it, they emulate that all the time. They take the pyramids, they got the stuff down at the Louvre, you know, all in their secret society. They got all Anubis there. They got the entire Egyptian Book of the Dead consistently on display that no one understands except for those who crack the script to know what the script means. Mm-hmm. And so thus they're deifying themselves. That's what they were counting down to. Well, we're going to, because this God that they're worshiping, which if you ever really understand this stuff, or if you ever even have the opportunity to speak with someone who is a sorcerer, they're very clear about this. Their God lives in the realm of Nod. Their God lives in the realm of the dead. Because if you look in the text, because Cain becomes the embodiment for the androgynon. That's why you always, the male androgynon that wanted a male womb that I was explaining earlier, that's code name Cain. Cain goes to the land of Nod. That's known as the astral plane, or the realm of the dead, or the realm of those that sleep. And the reason why it's called as such is because few, only the greatest adepts, can stay in the astral plane indefinitely. And even then, it breeds a certain level of madness. Why? Because it's not stable. See, the whole reason for us to be on Earth, and why Earth is often associated with a tree and with roots, and you need roots, you need ground, is because you cannot just float off into the abyss indefinitely and expect to maintain any kind of memories. You can't anchor yourself. So they say that their God went into that realm and is maddened by that realm. So anytime that God is brought into this realm or evoked into this realm on those specific holidays, it comes ravaging, pillaging, and all distorted and just maniacal. There's even words. The words that mean the most craziest things are actually the words that come from the name of that entity. So we have to realize then that what we're dealing with is see, this word soter, S-O-T-E-R. This is the word that was originally used for when we said savior, because we have to stop trying to sync English words back 2,000 years ago. You can keep it in the Greek perspective, but you can't cross it over into things like koinoform and into metuneter. And it's because that's where they cut everyone off from the knowledge. They removed the hieratic and demotic scripts, which are the scripts. Okay, I got to go back a little bit. So what happens is that the rise of this masculine distorted empire starts with Samaria. And it's because that's why the Sumerians are like the epitome of the matriarchal civilization empire, right? They even tell you that in history books. Oh, they started the first civilization. Now, everyone knows if you're wild, the last thing you hate, the last thing you want to do is be civil. And then you see in the Sumerian paintings them messing with the tree. That's the tree of life. That's the genetics. And you also see them with taming these beasts. Those are the aspects of the zodiacs, also known as the archons, that are the root to the organ systems and things of the physical bodies of all beings of flesh. So what you're witnessing, though, is because Tons Bruns, he proves this without a doubt. And that's why his books are like $150, right? He's got 2 books, and it's called Geometrica Egyptica, I believe, the geometry of Egypt. And what he goes on to explain is basically the Sumerians hated the Kemetans. And what they did was they hated them so much that they didn't want to use their language, so they created this language called cuneiform. And this cuneiform language, which is set up on a grid of 8 by 8. Now, we've heard of that grid before. That's I Ching, and that's the chessboard. That this grid was actually what they began to construct this language, this new language that they began to develop, which was wedges. These wedges also are synonymous with how to bore into your spirit. That's why they're holding that pine cone up against a tree, because they're using wedges in that specific design, which is a concave triangle with a point, to burrow into realities or into consciousness. But that may be too deep. So just to keep it on the surface, all the language is doing is recording how many slaves they have, how many kings, the king's power. It records most of what we find in the matriarchal tradition of the Bible, the flood story, Gilgamesh. We find every single person, Upnefishtin, Noah. So it shows you that the patriarchal cult actually starts in Samaria, because the Sumerians were envious of the Kemetans and the knowledge of Ma'at and the great mother earth, blah, 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 blah. So they created the tradition. They killed Tiamat. Marduk kills Tiamat. So you're seeing the embodiment of the entire story that I'm explaining to you right now between 2 people, Sumerians and Kemetans. And those 2 groups today make up the opposite ends of that rainbow. And it seems like to me, though, because I'm not trying to demonize the Sumerians, because to say they were all evil is like saying that all the Kemetans were good. What has to happen is same thing that Dynamo Jack had said. You got to learn how to bring these forces together. And it seems like to me that these 2 forces, just from a aspect of studying history, are the embodiment of the logical and the spiritual. Because without those 2 components, one can go headlong into error. Meaning that even if you don't have that check and balance system and you're going with the flow, you're probably going to end up in a short period of time in the hands of some evil person. Meaning that you're like, okay, oh yeah, brother, whatever you want to do. Oh yeah, let's say that. Let's sing that. Oh, okay, yeah, let's go there. Okay, let's pray to this. Oh, that's what you want me to do? So if you're just with the flow, which is also a symbol of the divine feminine, if you're just with the flow and you don't have that, wait a minute, but why are we doing this? Which is the symbol of the logical masculine, like I need some instructions and I need to know where that came from. Then you can come off balance. You can put yourself into a situation that you're not prepared for. So now fast forwarding, see how I had to explain just the history of what was going on with these 2 back and forth superpowers. Is the word soter, which is where I left off, meant savior, okay? So any character like what we call Jesus was known as a soter. But the interesting thing is when you really study this word, because it also means to deliver, the deliverance, safety, preservation, this is a soter. But the identity of a soter was always a demon, the spirit daemon of a cult. Like basically what it's saying is any tradition that came forth always had a focal point, something that they were trying to point everyone to. In Christianity, it's Jesus. In Islam, it's Muhammad. In Buddhism, it's Buddha. In every tradition, there is something that they try to point you to concentrate all your power.
Yeah.
And that becomes known as a daemon. And that word does not necessarily mean something positive or something negative, just something you should observe. And because it gets life, because we give it life, that's why even in certain texts and scriptures it says, you gave me life. It says even that God breathed breath into other forms. Who's God if it isn't man and woman? We can breathe life into other things. It's even deeper than eidolons, which are like when we think about things really heavy and then an energetic form is created. This is different. This is devotion. This is worship. This is praise. This is honor. This is what they call the sevenfold spirit. The sevenfold spirit is all the things of the greatest character that you can emit from yourself to another. And that's why they call it a devotee. Because when you give all of those essences, which seem to also correspond with your 7 organs, correspond with the 7 fluids, the melatonin, serotonin, etc. When you give all of that into something else, it becomes animate because you've given it life, God. So this is what's happening. So the big play is that we push our power into something else. It becomes more powerful while we become weaker. And then the more power we push into that, the less power and connection we have with ourselves, which is our ancestral lineage. And then the less power we have to give to our ancestors. This is like some people always spend more time in these church and these temples than they ever spend at grandma's house, than they ever spend with granddad, ever.
Yeah.
Even with their own children, they spend more time in the church and praying and on their knees than they spend with their children. And it's because their power is being drained and diverted. But notice how, because I know you two are on to this, but notice how all of this is done without the slightest bit of realization that this is what's going on. Likewise, here's another deeper thing that we mentioned during the last conversation, but we can't neglect to mention it during this one. And it's that, so remember, this cult that we're talking about, which makes up these soders or daemons, it's a wand or torch that keeps being passed from one person to another. And this could be Constantine the Great. This could be the immortal Charlemagne. This could be Alexander the Great. Generally, whoever it is has the great behind their name, and they generally want to be served. This could be Jesus, the King of Kings. It could be any king or any lord. Generally, anyone who wants to take upon that title. Because in the ancient setting, if you were to become the leader of the tribe, first of all, generally there wasn't a leader. What there was elders. And you can't actually put elders in the same category as leaders, because we see leaders as like the guy who's triumphing with the sword and the king, and just all the ideology that they give us today, versus the role of what we would call leader back in the times, the elders, was to give you knowledge and wisdom, was to nourish you in times of trouble. You don't see that in these kings today. Never do you see, when you're stranded or in bad luck, any of these folks showing up to talk to you about anything.
Yeah.
No. So they can't be defined as actual elders. They're surrogates. They're sorcerers. They've usurped the power of most cultures and put themselves into that position, right? So we find that there's quite a few of them, but they all adhere to this one archetypical structure. It's a top-down structure like a pyramid. And when we start to identify them more, and I have to take a break here for just a quick moment. I wanted to take a break at the top hour. But then we start to really unmask what's kind of like behind all of these religions. And I'll bring up this topic before we take a quick break. And this topic really is that we now need to look into just one specific scenario about selling a spirit, okay? Because you can never sell the soul. You don't have a name. If it doesn't have a name, then it hasn't been created. So from that level alone, what exists within all of us can never be pinned down or sold, or someone can take it or whatever. Now, somebody can fool you and make you believe that such things could happen, which is a whole different matter. But in truth, the soul cannot be even put into a bottle, can't be identified, okay? But you can sell your spirit, it turns out. And people need to be aware of this, because many people are selling their spirits, and they just need to cancel those contracts and get their spirit back. Because this happens when they go out and they delve into these different kind of belief systems and these occult structures, and they do things that bind themselves into it more, like the rituals and the beliefs and the baptism. All this stuff is designed to tie them in more, just to create memories and reference points to where the person feels like they can't get out of that structure. So, and generally, the more people are involved in it, then you have the 100th monkey syndrome working against us. Okay? Because we always talk about this 100th monkey syndrome in consciousness, that one day that all of a sudden consciousness is going to start sweeping the land, and then we're going to have this 100 monkey syndrome, right? But what if ignorance is sweeping the land and we get 100 monkey syndrome in ignorance? Isn't that just is viable to happen? Yes, it's 100 monkey syndrome is not just exclusive to good things happening, but for a mind that only thinks good, it is. And that's why we have to keep our minds in balance so we can get the other side of the story. Because what the other side of the story shows us is that, okay, let me give you a brief synopsis. So Baphomet actually ended up becoming the symbol that they're using today to explain to you this off-balance, matriarchal, hermaphroditic freak. And the reason is that you understand it is because John the Baptist is actually also the embodiment of Baphomet. Okay, and this John the Baptist was also Oannes. Oannes was known to be the fish god male who came from the sea and was associated with the Sumerian pantheism. Remember I told you a while ago, because he gets another name in the Sumerian, but I said a while ago that, yeah, remember in Sumerian drawings you see the guy, he's standing up there with the king, as a king, and he's got the fish on his back? That's Oannes. Wasn't that the guy that they said that came and taught them all their knowledge? But what kind of knowledge was he teaching? That was the cult right there. That's the cult of the Baptists, or the cult of the Baphomet, or the one who comes from that says he comes from the sea, right? He comes from this ocean. He's coming to baptize. So what you start seeing in the metamorphosis of this whole process is that the Knights Templar, one of the main portions of this cult is the relics. See, there's even an ancient saying that says that when we have the relics, we become more powerful. Our cities, meaning our powers, become greater. That's why they put these relics in New York. They put these relics in the Vatican, because through these relics are holding energy of people praying and worshiping them for thousands of years, and also the true embodiment of what they really mean, but then it becomes distorted and hacked. So one of the relics was the head of John the Baptist. What you see in the Bible was said to be cut off. See, this was the king that lost his head to the cherubim. And they said that that head, which kind of gives us the mythology of the crystal skulls, had the ability to prophesy. And the reason is that any being that begins to take in a large amount of light, this is gnosis, their pineal gland and their hippocampus and hypothalamus begin to crystallize. It's like what we see in crystals today. So when you're gone, your head becomes like a crystal ball. And people can consult with your head. So it's sure enough, you find in ancient cultures, even all the way up until today, skulls being consulted for knowledge and information. But this one in specific that I'm talking about is the head of Oannes. Now, some say it's crypto. It's actually not a physical head. It's more of the phallus symbol. That's why supposedly Osiris, which is the entry of the dominant male culture into the Egyptian pantheon, doesn't have his genital principle. It's removed. It was cut off. So this is supposedly what they have, and that's why they show all this phallic symbolism around what they do. And in this, they consort with the entity behind the phallus. Okay, so again, it gets into a lot of the male distortion kind of things, which we'll just leave at that. So that was a part of the rites of joining into Knights Templar. So when we look at the Knights Templar, which are the embodiment of all secret societies today, think about it. If you study secret societies, anyone who studies them knows that they have their root in the Knights Templar. And who those Knights Templar were the same people that you see that were dominating territories and attempting to become rulers of everything. And they had stooped to sorcery, necromancy, dysurgy, and syzygy. You have to look up those words to understand what they mean. I don't have the time and space to actually explain them. But when they resorted to that, it's like, again, someone who would do anything for power. They had become under the persuasion of something that had already been cut off long time ago, meaning that This thing is just making a comeback. That's why we're experiencing so much turmoil in the world, because back in the day, me and you had already gotten rid of this thing, meaning we had already restored balance and killed the whole idea that there was going to be one that was greater than the other. And what we promised is that that would never happen again, because it breaks the bridge as it's doing now. All this is like layman's terms for us right now. If we just get out of the hole that this is mystical and that, this is it has to be, on the spiritual plane, bring it right here, right now. We are under duress. And we cannot live in this kind of frequency and reality. And no longer do we want to live with losing our memories, which is our power, because then we will be coming in here on training wheels every single time. And this thing, which is preserving itself lifetime after lifetime because it stole the knowledge from the book of the dead, will be so many far lengths ahead of us. It will keep whipping us around with stories that we can get into and just dissect and still never get us any further than where we started, like what's happening today in the conscious community with their most prevalent topics that still have nothing to do with spirituality, but have to do with things that people are doing and creating right now in the world, like the politics and the government. So to continue, who the Knights Templar were they were these group of sorcerers. And what they call hermetics. As way they say, it's the hermetic system of the Golden Dawn. It's not the alchemical system of the Golden Dawn, because those who were hermetics, and this is not saying anything bad to one who studies hermetics under the guise that it's alchemy, because I was one of those people. I thought that hermeticism was the being a hermit and being by yourself, basically, and studying knowledge and not letting the world get to you. It turns out that it's not. It's actually consecrated to Herne, the hunter, or Holy Hermes. And when you check the ID of this character, it's Baphomet. That's why in Baphomet's picture, he's holding the rod of Hermes in his lap. Go look at it. Because it's telling you that we have this knowledge of everything about you, your positive side, your negative side, your central side, and that egg on top that we want to eat. It's showing you in their symbolism that they want to dominate us, that they want to take our power and our freedom away. But how can they do such things? Well, we're not talking about a dummy. See, that's the other problem, is people think that these beings are ignorant. But we're not. We're functioning on 20 years, 30 years, 40 years of memory. They have all the ancient records. So who's going to be the dummy until we rebuild the bridge? So what happens is that what they did was they devised a system that no one would ever know was actually a system that removes their spirit. And we're going to talk about that system right now. Actually, let's talk about it when we come back. That's a good segue, and it allows us to take a brief moment. Let me just, clear my mind, go use the restroom really briefly. And then when I come forward, I'm going to finish off in this conversation today. We're going to answer the questions that need to be answered, but with really the greatest revelation, if you may, of the moment of understanding these Knights Templar and their religion, and also what exactly they were doing that has got us so binded at this point.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And also how to get out, because knowing is half the battle. Remember, I don't talk about any of this stuff if there's not something in this that's going to allow us to break free. Because other than that, it just goes into the category of, hey, that's just poison. It seems to not have a cure bundled with it. What I'm going to reveal is to let people understand exactly what's going on so they can't be fooled. And then it's a simple mind change. Like what you'll notice is that I'm going to mention some things that have been done that have a cause and effect to them. And it makes us feel low, and it makes us feel in debt, and it makes us feel like we owe somebody something. But that's a system that has been put in place, that the moment that we reveal the fallacy behind that and the falsehood in it, then it dissolves there. There's nothing to go and fill out. There's nothing to change about your name, and none of that crazy stuff that people have going on right now, because the transitions are made first on the spiritual plane, not in the physical. So the moment that you send from your mind, which is the closest to the spirit, when you send from your mind the confirmation of what you're about and what you know, then those changes begin to be made. So let's take about 5 minutes here, 10 minutes, And then when we come forward, I really want to drill into this. And I also want to say thanks for those that are listening. And then I, of course, want to say thanks to Christina and Stefan, for bringing this back around so that we can, reveal this to people, because, this stuff is like going through a minefield with 100 people behind you. Because you're walking over history, and then you're also walking over some very uncomfortable parts of history. And that's, of course, and not to keep another conversation going on, so another thing people need to know is that the thalamus is what's really responsible for what we actually see. It can tune out what we call the spiritual world, because we don't like to see those figures that are in the spiritual world. Like when you see someone down and out and on downtown drinking and drugging, and you're just looking at them, what else do you think is going on around them on the spiritual plane? You can only imagine, right? But back in the day, we could see it. And the whole goal of us being able to see it was to get rid of it, because we weren't sorcerers. You see, we didn't need something from him. See, people leave the people there because they're like, oh shit, surely he can't give me anything, so I'm out of here. We don't care that he's being tormented by something that's out of our visual spectrum. But when you have the compassion, that's like, oh, the passion of Christ. They like to try to mix it in, but it's really when you have that compassion, your kundalini is open. And when your kundalini is open, you can see those entities. And when you see those entities, then you put those entities in place, and then that man is truly free. But until then, he remains binded by his own vices and his own minions, decisions and choices that he made, and light has not come to him. But see, that's the bridge. That's why even in the highest level of initiation, the book is called The Bridge to the Light, because what it's trying to emulate is the statement that we bring light to the darkness. We toil in the field. The man mainly as the gardener, his creation was in the physical plane to reap the burden of the physical plane. That's why he was made physically stronger, so the woman could keep up the spiritual plane, right? So the man's strength and physical strength is for him to be able to confront those entities that are still needing to be planted again and still need to be nourished again. See, this is not just about kicking some ass. This is about in destroying or killing something. This is about becoming a man and becoming a woman and being an adept. That's what this whole grow up process is. And I wouldn't doubt for one moment that all of this stuff that I just talked about is happening just so we can do that. I wouldn't put it past the universe, because what I saw was so intelligent. I could not and I cannot believe that it's making a mistake.
Yeah.
You see, like it's not possible. And even within our own existence, we can start, when you start to feel yourself, you start to realize that, wait a minute, this is hypersentience. So could it possibly be that I'm interpreting things the wrong way? That all of this stuff is actually happening so that I can wake up. And what I'm waking up to, and I'll explain people the simple process, and I get into it a lot deeper in semester 2. But when we are planted here by ourselves, the process is done so that way we can keep the generation of perpetual energy in the system. The cosmos is a perpetual system. So we send a seed. When we send a seed, when the seed makes impact, it takes on the mark. The mark is our frequency, our tone, our vibration, or what you would call your name. That remains hidden for a while, meaning you don't have the identity of who you really are yet. And then as you grow up, as long as you grow up with the right fermentations and all the right crucible nature and the pressure and all of the stuff that's needed in this planet. Think about it. We got atmospheres, we got pressurization, we got oxygen, we got syzygy, we got synergy, we got all these different things going on just to create the right environment for our growth or our decay. Because behold, I saw the ladder coming up and down. I didn't see the ladder just going one way. See, that's the person that just wants to be good. They're like, well, the ladder's only going up. No, the ladder's going down. And the reason why you need that is you need to know you can mess this up. You can by sitting on your couch all day or talking about people all day or not thinking that this is serious. Totally put yourself into the position of disadvantage to where you're going to need the light to come to you in a while. But while you're in this position to actually begin to shine on your own, you've grown up to that level, take it all the way. So that's all I'm saying. So we're going to be right back, and we're going to finish off about the Knights Templar and their temples of their banks, and then we're going to go ahead and close today's conversation, if that's okay.
Yep. Wonderful. All right, be right back.
We all want to see, we all want to be real, and we're searching when we're finding.
Okay, I'm ready. If there's anything else that you want to mention before we get started.
Well, there's one thing, because you had mentioned the, it's going up and it's going down, and lo and behold, and there's one thing, one word that I was thinking about, if you think of the moving stairs or whatever, and this old lift, this old elevator, we had talked about it before in the conversation, was called Paternoster, right? You had to jump on, it was open, there was no doors, and it was just going up on one side and down on the other side. And you just got to make the right step, you can't rush it, you can't be hesitant, and if you make the wrong move, you can die on that thing too. So that is just another picture that kind of rounds it up here.
Exactly. And, and the easiest insight for people to have about what's really going on, also to kind of, because anytime you deal with twos, you're going to deal with duals. So I tell people I haven't got even a chance to talk to people really, because I'm completely engaged in so many things. But I advise you to find four. Like there's a sequence of how numbers move. And if you understand that sequence, and then you know the diametric opposition to the way the numbers move, then you can always find balance. So anytime there's a dual, will always be a four, just like in numbers there's 2 and 4. So what we find, and then in 4 you'll find the absolute, like a truth. And the truth is that even in our, let's say our growth, we actually go up and down and left and right at the same time. That's what they call expansion. So it's just like a bubble. As the bubble begins to blow up, it doesn't just go up. So this whole idea that, oh yeah, I'm on the ascent, you're also on the descent, and you're also on the left scent or the right scent, whatever those terms are. And also what we see though is that those who they make themselves singular. You can find them going up into higher states of consciousness. You can find them going down into lower states of consciousness. You can also find them going left and right. And what left and right is actually through the hierarchical structure on the earth of the fleshly life forms, meaning animals and humans, like that whole range of, from elephant to zebra to dolphin that's called left and right. And that gives us the whole procession of time and the creation and the metamorphosis of the species. And the beginning would be a snake and the end would be a bird, and everything in between, because those two embody all the genetics to create all the other entities that are within the soup, as you called it earlier. And these things we'll find as facts. They're higher truths. So they confer their power to the cosmos, and they cannot be altered. And for one to step in the way of them, and also step in the way of anyone who's moving with them, will be in the effect of one who steps in the way of the sun as it's going through its procession. Good luck. So that's why if you move with that kind of energy and you move with that kind of knowledge and power, then it puts you into a whole nother perspective. And that's really just about the expansion of your consciousness and assisting others with doing the same thing. But again, expansion means to blow out on all sides. So because of that, the higher that I get, the more I know about the depths. That's how my knowledge actually continues to grow, is because as I'm expanding, I'm also becoming aware of what's down there. And this is what also makes expanding a bit difficult, because just as you learn something like this higher truth about not allowing your energy to be siphoned by soders and not letting Eve angels get in the way of your power, you also learn about that there is these entities that have actually done that and accomplished that, because anything that you can say has already been manifested. And so, and they're thriving in the world today and doing that to others. And if it just happens to twinge in your heart, okay, because this is what's unique. If it twinges in your heart that that's not supposed to be, then by all means, then change it. Because anything that is in your heart is, you have to follow your heart with that kind of thing. So that's why I'm never going to be apologetic about what I've said about these entities and what I feel about them and what I believe people should do about them, because it's in my heart. And as long as I follow that, then I'll be fine. You see what I mean? Because I can't be judged. See, and we'll talk about that at the end of the conversation, and I'll write a note here, the judges, because it's about crossing this hebdomad. See, these beings that I'm going to name right now, which are people, they're spirits. These are all spirits we're talking about. Now remember, the soul is not involved in this. The soul is everything. We can't ID it. So what happens is that the ones that are actually involved, they've been perpetrating this for quite a bit of time. And it's important for, when we learn about it, for us to take this knowledge also as serious. So there's somewhat a disclaimer here before I start explaining what I need to explain. If you play with this, it'll take you out. Like, I've seen a lot of people get taken out by this. Even right now, there are people that every time we say knowledge, they already try to serve darkness. So they're just looking for the words and the names of who they should go serve, because they're still in slavery. They're in slavery from debts from lifetimes ago when someone gave them multiple life sentences. Meaning that when you get in front of a judge and a judge gives you multiple life sentences, does that hold across realms? That was a question that was asked to me. And in that, I came across an epiphany and realization that if we believe in these controllers and these sorcerers and their power, if we believe that their power is greater than ours, then it will extend across lifetimes. There's people that have been given those life sentences that even when they die and start reincarnating, feel like they still owe someone for what they did a long time ago. And they work in that system. That's called hooks. That's why in most of the whole system with dark magic, they even use symbolically physical hooks. So that kind of thing, we have to ID that. And that's why it's 180 degrees of knowledge and then another 180 degrees to complete the circle. If you only have one half, the good side, then it leaves you ignorant, the dark side. And so that's what people need to understand. In their ignorance, they're becoming darkness, because you will constantly engage in things that you don't even think have anything to do with holding others back and be directly involved. Just like when people gossip. Just like when someone comes to you and instead of helping your brother, you try to condemn your brother. You want to be greater than your brother and your sister. You want to be better than the woman, or you want to be, all those are the same ideas that come from the same root and source. So we have to realize that in ourselves, the root to all of our ideas, if they don't involve us connecting and coming together and building energy and connecting with everything that we really are and ever can be, because that's the only way we'll find happiness. So I'm not trying to run from here like I'm going to go somewhere and find happiness. Happiness is here now, and I have to obtain it, and I'm attaining it through this way of allowing others to break through the mess. So here's the story. Realize that sorcery is the first technology, period. I can't say enough about if you show up 400 years in the past with some of the stuff that you're running around with right now, they're going to worship you as God, and we'll read about you 400 years later, because you're doing things like little people inside of pictures, little pictures inside of the thing, like, and there's people moving around in there. Is this some kind of magic? Even the mirror was the first symbol of magic for the ancients, because it was amazing. I mean, geez, there's a reflection of something that's right there. Is that another world? Is that two places? And, you know, and even deeper than that, there's so much that we're forgetting, that the power of light, which Prometheus, the power of fire, these are all metaphors for, first of all, just like I was saying about memories, if you don't know how to control fire, you're going to get snuffed out by the darkness. The darkness is like, if you've ever been in the cave before, the darkness is penetrating. It's like you can have your eyes open. It just feels like it's going through your eyes and going through your being and everything. Darkness is a whole nother kind of energy. So what happens is in the light, you can start to identify the uniqueness within yourself. So you need these darkness and this light in order to become something. That's what it's saying. That's how things are created. So just still remember, though, bringing the fire is also gave us the power to push back things that would have destroyed us before we even got out of the seed pod. Meaning that even you could see the ancestors with the torches telling the woolly mammoth, look, we got to set up things here. So you have to understand that we all have ancestors. Those are the Neanderthals. So if we're taking the negative side or the distorted masculine and the distorted feminine of the ignorance of the seed level of our ancestors, and we're just placing that in our forefront and acting like that's all that they're about, then it's like disrespecting your family members and just agreeing because they did one thing wrong or what you perceive as wrong because you're judging them, then somehow you don't want to talk to them anymore. It's all the same thing. And when we create those, so then don't be upset and don't blame anyone when you find yourself cut off, because no one can cut you off but you. You flip the switch. So I want everyone to know that before I explain what I'm about to explain, for you feel like that these archons and all the rest of the names that you can give for them are so heavy that they're weighing you down. Because when you stop thinking that you're in debt to them and that you got to serve them, people are so in the brainwash service program. I get emails from people that have been reading knowledge for 4 or 5 years that we've been producing, still trying to associate with some name or something that they can say has power and that is now them.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole thing, is like it's just trying to take over your consciousness and take your power anyway. And the smarter you get, the smarter it gets, because you're expanding, right? And so this also shows us that whatever it is, it will always live within us. It's about whether we can contain it, whether it actually is put in its proper place, whether it's being, you know how you see someone that has all these powers and abilities. This is Hermes' motif. It's the same as Loki's. All this power, all this intelligence, all this ability, but doing dumb stuff. That's why you notice in Hollywood, the jokers suffer the worst. The comedians suffer the worst. Even there's a sect of the masonry that's the court of the jesters. They suffered the worst. Even with the king, who's next to him, the jester. Even in the card, the Joker is the card that trumps all of the cards, but something's wrong with the Joker. You can look at that and tell. Look what happened to Heath Ledger. So these are real things. Anytime you can map it in the reality to be occurring, you can find the correspondence to it through the occult. Sorcerers are jokers. They're jesters. So what happened? They first started doing fake tricks to try to get people to believe that they had power. And this comes from people's incessant greed in wanting favoritism, long life, and prosperity when that's already promised to you. You don't have to engage that. That's your allotment. You don't need to confirm something that you already have, right? But notice how all the cultures are rife with trinkets and all sorts of little bags and plants and all these different things that are supposed to give you long life, prosperity, etc., but not ingested, but just some carved out symbol. This is the corruption of the mind as it begins to lean on other things. So now all of a sudden a twig or a branch becomes more powerful than a rainbow bridge. Where does that happen? Not to mention, if we start to believe that this little tree, this little branch, this little symbol has so much power, if somehow we're without it one day, oh my goodness, that means we're doomed, right? Just like that's how they played out their lost word scenario. They had the word to create everything and then they lost it. How stupid. You would think you would have kept that as if anything else, right? So just notice the game that's being played. So all these different trinkets and things left man wide open for the sorcerers. Sorcerers come using science. These are even these words today you can find in the organization, the Code of Zion. Even right now, like I have bought this device called the SIO, which is a handheld molecular scanner, and they just came under a class action lawsuit because of using that word. And then they brought up that word, and this is an Israeli company, is used within so many other corporations. They were wondering why they're being sued for it. But SIO and Sion is actually the root to the word of 2012 and the period in which that we will go through the emulation and the creation of a new world. Now we have to ask that ourselves then, are we going to be immersed into this new world, body of Christ, masculine, homogenous, whatever they got going on? Or are we going to finally go into the level that we're supposed to be with a world that is completely combined, where everyone gets to experience and express their uniqueness? So here it is. Sorcerers look for individuals like kings or people of divine lineage to try to tuck themselves under, show a few tricks to, and then get that king corrupted into the idea that through the use of this kind of power, which could even be explosives and fireworks, that they can control everything. This is the Jafar in the Aladdin, for Disney speak. Okay,
Yeah.
so these sorcerers were all over the place, and a few of them are Apollonius of Tyana, which was a member of the cult of Apollo. So there was more Apolloniuses. This was Pythagoras, which of course is the headmaster of the Pythagorean Lodge, which encompassed Plato, Socrates, and all the rest of the guys of those days. There was Simon Magus, or Bar Magus, the magician, who even attempted to buy Abraxas or Oannes' power from him. And you see him coming through the Bible. See, only when you know this stuff, only when you live this, can you ever realize what's going on. And then, or if you're guided. So anyone who actually hears a conversation, you get the knowledge. That's called those of the guided. That means they don't have to go and dig all night or run through some church and, had something come out of the wall and all that to finally know this, because will you even make it through all of that? But I'm telling you, I know this because I experienced it firsthand. And people who have met me to know what I've been involved with in attendance to what I've went through, they say they've never seen anyone come out from that like this, with a family, with kids, with trying to help people. But I came out because that's in my core. I don't like favoritism. I don't like when one person sets themselves up over another, and I always go and root for the underdog. That's just who I am. And so when I came into spirituality, I'm a savant. Everything that I study and I learned throughout my life, I mastered. So when spirituality got in front of me, I found myself quite up for the task, but quite overwhelmed about how many different integers were contained in spirituality. I mean, stuff was going everywhere. Not to mention, I had a spiritual past, so I had a lot of residue and other stuff to deal with, stuff that's trying to get me to judge things one way. So again, nobody makes it out generally. So I'm only rendering the formula, because people need to understand that if you can say, I'll give you a simple example. If you can say that, let's say, for instance, martial arts, and the art of martial arts primarily comes from Asia, hence jujitsu, karate, etc. If you can say that, then if a person wants to study the deepest art of martial arts, they're probably going to go to Asia. What I'm telling you is that the melanin dominant people of this planet, many of them had as custodial jobs and purposes to manage the spiritual world, just like someone would do martial arts. And the reason for that is that we all had a unique power and ability. And for us, we're not scared of all of this stuff. And I'm not saying it's specific to one color, because this is something that exists within inside of you. See, we keep looking at these outside colors, and you would be surprised when you're on the diamond, or you got the third eye open, you look at somebody, it looks like the face of the Keanu Reeves on a scanner darkly. When the face is just morphing into all these different characters, and you're like, man, and then, the ones that are paranoid, am I in front of a shapeshifter? The reality is that what exists within a person, if you're a seer, you can see all of their bloodline. And because every single thing goes back to the same source, then you can see everything. So you see what I mean? And so, but what governs what we see? Our judgments.
Yeah.
Our judgments. So that tells us, like I said, the thalamus operates on our judgments and determines what we can and cannot see by our own orders. There's no laws being broke here then. So if we agree to something and we didn't know what we agreed to, that's our bad. And I find that many people in this world have agreed to things that I know directly result in them not being able to awake. They may think they're awake. Because a person that's brainwashed and mind controlled doesn't know they're brainwashed and mind controlled, silly. That's the whole purpose of brainwash and mind control. The host is never to know. So you just have to assume, like, there's a way to operate under the assumption that you've been brainwashed and mind controlled, and then start going back over everything that you think you believe, and then setting up a blueprint or a system to be able to determine and define what it really is. And then what you're left to deal with after that is the ability to make the decision. And that's the decision. That's the difference between neophytes and adepts. Meaning a boy or a girl will sit there all day knowing that there's a decision that they need to make and will not make that decision, even if it's to the detriment and destruction of everything around them, versus an adept will make that decision right away. And this is for people who want that in relationship or emotional speak. If there's somebody that you're with and you know that you're not supposed to be with them, then why are you still with them after 5 or 10 years? That's how that operates. It's like you get so many things. Well, maybe it'll get better, or well, there's nobody else out there for me, or well, I'm working on something else right now, so it's something I don't really need to confront, or well, they did apologize, or maybe I expect too much, or they said that we actually give ourselves a thousand different reasons within 10 seconds. That's how powerful the mind is. That if we don't make the decision to do something right away, we've already given ourselves within 10 seconds 1,000 reasons on why you do not want to do it. So what I'm about to tell you is going to now make more sense because it explains to you exactly how the mind operates with actually believing any of this stuff. So through this idea of the trinkets, the sorcerers move themselves in. Now, science produced some rather strange phenomena. For anyone, like imagine the king. The king is just like any kid that's got all this damn money that they never even leave out of the palace without an extreme retinue and guard and everybody watching what they do. Versus the kid that's the pauper, like Aladdin was, born in the streets, knows more about life and what to really do and how to survive than the king ever will. Am I right or am I wrong? So the truth is that the king never was really the person that had all this knowledge and wisdom. That's the truth. So what you dealt with was when the sorcerers came on them, they were like overwhelmed. Sorcerers move with a different kind of power that the king was not familiar with. The kings were the responsible for overthrowing the matriarchal system that had everything in check. That's when the masculines move in and dominate. But then they were no match for the sorcerers because the matriarchal clans were handling the sorcerers. The priestesses were handling these sorcerers with no problem. See, I'm just giving you a little foreground of what went on in history. So that's how you saw large groups of people, leaders, countries, be overthrown step by step as it is being done today. So in the midst of it, though, was just that idea that I could become the conqueror of the world. And someone feeding that idea to you. So you had it move from the Chaldean magic first. Okay, Chaldean magic is the strongest form of magic. It's Sumerian. Samaria is Chaldea. This is the birth and the root of the cult of the worship of a male, Tammuz and Damuzi. So then it moves from there into the Yazidis. I'm somewhat giving a chronological order. This is the Iranians that found the books and found the doctrines of practicing the magic from the Sumerians, which actually starts digging into necromancy. That the only way to actually bring a male back into the world without sending him through the womb is you have to raise him from the dead. Hello, that's Christianity. He raises from the dead. He's not even born of a woman. She's a virgin. See, we have to understand what are these people playing around with? I feel like I'm in a world where I'm somewhat one of the only people that know what the hell is going on just by critical thinking. If anyone believes this kind of story, and you got millions of people believing this kind of story, and we reverse engineer it, what are these people thinking? What are they really like under that skin? So what we find is that this dominant male undead god as king becomes the actual religion that everyone starts to gravitate towards through this idea that man needs to be everyone's god. This goes out in the Bible as Saul, which means salt, which is Saturn, which is the cube, gets elected as king over the Israelites. But before, they were constantly being told that, hey, you guys don't need a king. You don't need a king. And so this plays out. So remember, all this stuff about the 12 tribes of Israel, this is all zodiacal codes for MEs that are embedded into humans' minds. 12 tribes is obviously 12 signs of the zodiac. The 12 signs of the zodiac are the archons because they're the animalistic forces used to create a person's urges. Those urges act out in zoomorphication and can be written in writing called hieroglyphics. In the event that you write the words in the proper order in the sequence, you've put out the alchemical formula in order to create life. Done. Okay? And life comes from fragments of the soul, which can't be identified. And it can't be identified, and we should be glad, because if we could identify it, we would become disenchanted with it. Thus, there would be no way out. So, because we still realize we have a soul and we want to really deal with that now, we're now ready to conquer these sorcerers. So just a little backstory of what they've done. So through the crazy Arab known as Abdul Hal has read, he brings the Necronomicon, which was the book chained down to the floor in the vault of the bottom of the pyramid. He brings the Necronomicon to what we would know today as the Osirian cult, which are the Hyksos kings, greedy and ready to do whatever. They've just overthrown Egypt, which was Kemet then. And now their necro army, which is something like what you would see in the movie Pitch Black with Vin Diesel, starts to move throughout the world as the Osirian cult, replacing all matriarchal traditions with patriarchal traditions. You get Muhammad, you get Christ, you get Buddha, you get all these males, but before all these were priestesses. The temples were only for pleasure and abundance. Tell you the truth, those are the kind of worlds I'm living in. If you guys like this, y'all can hang here. I'm going back to that then at least. Because I'd much rather deal with abundance and pleasure than scarcity, greed, hatred, jealousy, etc., which is the embodiment of the idea of this particular being, which you can read enough of in the Old Testament. If you just see how it really is, to chop off the heads of the firstborn and to kill other species and tribes just because they're not like you, you got a real issue. It's best if you're God to just get off the planet and go and build your own shit. Think about it. None of this shit makes sense. Excuse my language. If I'm the God and I created worlds and beings that I don't like, I'm a dip. Go create me another world. Let them hang out there, and I'm done. So why is it so hard for a God, if they have all this power, to just go and do something else? Why do they have to mess around with people who don't even have the power to overcome them?
Yeah.
Because that's what's clearly written, that these people don't even have power to overcome this thing. It's coming with like a nuclear bomb that people are carrying with two death angels on top of it. I mean, what are we dealing with here? You see, but this is our history, but this is why when we're cut off, we don't know it. When we turn back on, which people call activated, then all this stuff starts coming in like a floodgate. And you start trying to figure out how you're going to interpret even what I just said from when you're seeing that visually into something called English, which is like, already doomed you before you gotten started. So we see that we swam a long way. Instead of just having that 26 characters, we found this other 26. That gave us 52. That's the deck of the tarot. That's Egyptian, also known as a gypsy. See, gypsies use tarot. Tarot, the one that the English system is on, is 52 cards. 52 cards come out 52 weeks a year. This is a solar year for a solar god. This is not a lunar year for a lunar, abundant, pleasureful place that's running on magnet. This is the stress and the strife and the hissing and spitting and the serpent-like poison of electricity. You see what I mean? Powered by oil, which is blood money and blood energy, right? Like, think about this. This is this plastic and stuff. This is like blood diamonds all around us because they got this stuff from destroying and pillaging not only our planet, but also the people who were standing on the ground that felt that they were standing on the ground, that they felt that they were so cursed by being on. This is the tribe of Ham. They felt that because they were given the deserts that they were cursed when the allotments of the land went out. But then when they found that the oil was in the ground, they exacted retribution upon their brothers and sisters for leaving them in the land of the desert, which is where you find the genies and the jinn, right? So through that same Chaldean genie jinn magic, we're sitting here trying to figure out how we're going to get out of this bottle, right? Because now they started working the necromancy, and you know that because OTO and the Golden Dawn is rife with it. But even before then, the Osirian cults had passed it on to the Hyksos kings, and the Hyksos kings started spreading through the world in the symbol known as Abraxas, 365, which gives us 365 days of the year, and 5 gods that sit on the point of the pentagram in order to torture every single spirit that ever gets binded in a pentagram 5-base body. Then the knowledge continues from there and is passed on to whoever it is that's going to be the next accursed people. Because to get this, that's why they call, they're the chosen people, meaning you've been chosen for the burden. See, when those people that we're seeing right now in Israel picked up that damn box and carried it out of Egypt, they now know they should have left it there. This thing does not play, and it's tearing them up. The thing is that the Merovingians, which they became later, that's who you see on the Matrix, the French, because they attacked the knowledge from the Moroccans, which were actually taking the knowledge of the Arab Muhammad. Now, if we, for the Muslim people, if you want to feel a little bit better, I'm not talking about the Muhammad that everyone's praying to now, okay? Or maybe I am. Because how many times can you go into Israel, or excuse me, even in Israel, Palestine, Pakistan, anywhere over there and ask for Muhammad, and not have to at least go through at least 3,000 or 4,000 people? You cannot go over there and ask for Muhammad and expect that that's one person's name. But it looks like that the cult of Baphomet is the cult of Muhammad. And what it contains is all the knowledge that Abdul al-Hazred had, the real Necronomicon, and what they were doing in that cube or that box. which is basically a portal from the fourth dimension back into the third dimension. And it runs itself because, see, people don't understand. It all connects on the back end. None of this stuff is hocus pocus. To run a portal, it needs a power supply. The power supply must circumambulate like a generator. So all those people marching around the tower become the power for the portal so that they can keep coming in and out of the world from death to rebirth, again, as if they're being baptized in the fourth dimension and then rising back out of the mouth of it, which is coming out of the snake, as they call it. So Abraxas, which is the chicken head god, 365, aka Jesus. It is the most powerful symbol in Budun, and it is used still, Jesus' name right now, because it is known by anyone who practices spirituality that Jesus is the strongest demon in hell. So every time a person prays for nefarious and materialistic things, they generally evoke demons because they're the only ones that get into that kind of stuff. Yet they don't know. If you want a car so you can be in debt to Knights Templar and their temple, which is their bank, that's why it shows you when Yeshua came through, they had made the temple their bank. Think about what's being said. When the Messiahs, which is anyone who comes in, is like, hey, I don't think we're supposed to be doing this, comes in, the temple, which is the place of worship, actually was synonymous with the bank and where money was traded. What's being given right then is the hint that the Knights Templar were the ones that were actually conducting and funding the cult of Jesus and funding all of the cults since day one coming out of Chaldea. Right? They're getting the knowledge here on Opthink today. As we keep going with this, we find that the Merovingians then decide that they're going to disperse this knowledge under the term of Hermeticism and Gnosticism, which is actually Ophilatria. It's the worship of the snake, more specifically one snake known as Set. So as they get it, it continues to ravage them. Now they got these ideas of that they're going to actually, and all the time, remember, all the time they're pillaging the divine feminine. They're taking the knowledge and they're turning it upside down. Every single thing that they're grabbing from the truth, they're turning it around into their falsehood. Hermeticism is born, Gnosticism is born, and then all the different practices of Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and Ophilatria are rife throughout the land. This despoils the people. And then at a certain point, the knowledge makes it in because as it's spreading through the world like a plague. See, this is what you're looking at. It's the what they call the Black Plague. And it's spreading through all the people, and they're becoming infected by this idea and this belief system that something is king over them. So then it passes to the Cathars. The Cathars give it to the Catholics, or who are the Jesuits, and they're really the same. The Catholics and the Jesuits get it. And then through that, because this being is moving on a hyperdimensional level, the Catholics never see it coming. They got entire Orthodox Christianity in their own selfishness to create a God. See, they wanted, the Catholics who were the Greeks, they wanted to make a God so bad and just to make the whole world worship their God. And they thought that idea was unique to them. See, what you're watching is how the world is toppled because each of the groups that I just explained to you are actually on the key ley lines of the entire world. And something is coming to them at the same time telling them that they're the ones that are going to rule everything. How are you going to tell 7 people that they're going to be the one that's the ruler? So this is what happened to the kings. All their minds was poisoned at the same time by a hyperdimensional entity because it exists outside of time. I ID this as Osiris or Orion somehow has something to do with it. I'm not saying it's them directly, but they would know. So what happens is that this knowledge then, as the Cathars, the Catholics, now the Jesuits, they got their thing going on. They've built this sanctimonious kingdom that they've of all white, and then where any punishments or sins or anything that has to do with female that's done, one should be punished by it. There's no partying. There's no nothing. There's no pleasure. You see what I mean? So they're killing everything around them. This is written in the fable tales of when Venus pulls her energy from the earth and then everything starts dying because it won't copulate. This is because the Cathars issued a bull or decree throughout the land in order for everyone to basically be like Mormons, that there would no longer be any more sex because they had gotten to the idea that woman was the creation of evil and that by coming through her womb, we were putting our own selves back into the realm of a life eater. You see, and that same stigma that they created within their own mind actually wasn't a creation, but comes from what Jung explained with their hardships with being in the Caucasus Mountains and living in caves and having to deal with elements that were very disastrous for them, meaning the acts of God, as they call it now, meaning when weather turns against you as a person, when animals and beasts, which are intrepid, like you're not going to be out there with a saber-toothed tiger and a warm baby inside of a cave at night and expect for some to wake up and maybe you and the baby are dead. So you see, when you go into history and you go into the minds of the ancestors, you realize their plight. And only then can you have compassion. So you're not looking at it as, oh, that's another white person, or that's another black person, or all these Chinese, and they're taking all the jobs. And you're not looking at that anymore. You're just crying because the pain and the sorrow of when we're disconnected. And only when we come together can we sustain ourselves. And that's our lesson. And the university, which is the universe, has no problem with teaching us. It does not have feelings like we think it does. It has a positive and a negative and a neutral. And it operates as if it's a machine, keeping those three in balance. Not good, not bad, and not balanced, but all three. That's what creates a cosmos. That's why I said when looking into it, when staring into the eye or using the eye of the cosmos to stare into life, you realize the level of sentience. And it's awestruck. You're awestruck. And at any point when you ask a question about this minute situation that we're dealing with on earth, you pierce it like laser. This is what the term Lazarus was, to raise one from the dead. Meaning you come back with so much power and truth and light and energy, you can raise the dead. And that's not the same as the necromancy that they're utilizing, which is ripping people through dimensions. You see? But we don't have time to talk about that. So the Catholics weren't prepared for what the Knights Templar had done. See, the Knights Templar were already so steeped headlong into the buffoonery of wickedness that they had already enslaved all the people in their whole land. They were the feudal lords. Because see, remember when we read about the time of the feudal lords and the serfdoms and these empires that are basically taken over by warlike clans? The warlike clans were the embodiment of the distorted masculine. And it infected the Aztecs. It infected, you look in the books, you'll see it infected all the people. And it was the same thing, but it was happening on two different sides of the world in two what would appear to be different ways. But when it met head to head, surely the warlike clans had delved into much more darkness than the Jesuits had with their genie-based magic. And so what happened is that the Knights Templar had already been taking in the relics. Whoever their leader is and was pulling all the relics that people had been worshiping and practicing with and accumulating those relics. So by the time that the Jesuits were dealing with the Knights Templar, they immediately came under an agreement to allow the Knights Templar to begin to charge interest. Okay? So nobody could do that back then. Even to this day in Islam, it is illegal to charge someone interest. Look into Hadith. So the Catholic Church was the same way, and the Orthodox Christianity was the same way. You couldn't charge interest because everyone knew that if you charge interest, you would enter Set. Set would come because Set never allows you to be free because you'll always be in debt. How can you make more money unless you've taken it from another person to pay back your interest? Yeah. So it starts the chain reaction that can't be stopped until everyone puts the brakes on it at the same time. So what happens is the Knights Templar, they're infested with this. It's controlling them. See, this entity specifically, which we've been IDing across multiple realms, when it enters into one, it does not just stay in that one. It can enter into thousands, 2,000s. It's that expanded as far as where it's at. So you could have 20, 30, 40, 100 men all possessed by one entity. And that's how this entity generally moves. So it had completely infected the Knights Templar. They built Chateau Rajan or Roland or whatever it's called, which it's the crypt. It contains all of the essence of the entity that they're worshiping and all the symbolism. Everyone has already most people have done their research on that, but that's just to understand what they were up to. So now they got this interest, and now they also got something else. Sheep. They have good, soft meat. And these are all these new, naive Orthodox Christians that have just been converted to Christianity and given a story that's not actually true to form. In fact, you know, a lot of writings are starting to come up about this individual who was really who they casting as the person Jesus. And none of the whole being worshiped, even dying on the cross, none of that even took place. So what we're seeing is that these people, you know, because if you've ever looked into the eyes of a Jehovah's Witness, if you've ever looked into the eyes of a Mormon, you see such a level of purity. It's so difficult for you to associate that at all with being a part of some kind of diabolical plot or scheme. And the reason is it's more of like food for the diabolical plot or scheme that has been completely manipulated by just basic things of having a husband. See, when people are put into a feminine or receptive kind of status because they don't know where their power is and they're depending on something, then when something's strong, the king, I'm going to protect you. All the kings had the same story. We're going to protect your kingdom from all the vile nastiness and craziness that goes out there. And for that, you're going to give us your taxes. And your taxes could be your children. It's just like the military contract. We own your children. We own your life for the next 10 years. That's what those contracts say. Right now, it's not symbolic. You know, wake up, people. They say all your property belongs to us for this particular term. So anyway, so that's what was going on. And we see it even in our world today. There's few left that it hasn't happened to. And the Knights Templar were so instrumental in doing this because they had these people that were so naive under their control. And the Knights Templar were seen almost like what we would look at the X-Men today, except for they were really running around. This was a band of warrior monks that seemed to possess some kind of extraterrestrial power through these relics. And you even find them riding around in paintings today with different relics that had different power, different scientific objects, like they told you in the book Bishop Kenko and the worship of, oh man, it's just Google Bishop Kenko. But anyway, where this entity lives is also in somewhere in the sea, and in the sea was being produced all of what we see today as technology. So what I'm saying is as a Time Lord, you have access to the entire loop. So it's obviously if this thing, which could be Akhenaten or anything for that matter, has knowledge of the future, then it has knowledge of technology from the future. So telling somebody that serves it or giving somebody that serves it one of these pieces of technology to do something to groups of people that are way behind in technology to cause some kind of phenomena that God has power. Right? Because think about most of the people that you're reading about in these books and cultures, some kind of phenomena happens and then they're just like awestruck by God's power. And we covered that before about God is a weapon when we revealed that the true weapon that we have in this world, which we're calling God, is a nuclear weapon that we threaten other people with as a country. And if they don't do what we tell them to do, then we drop the weapon. That's the God that they trust. And that's why the weapon was created from the reverse engineering of the Upanishads when it explains how to make a Vimana Shastra or how to meditate and make yourself implode, which is the beginning of meditation. And then that knowledge is taken and then reversed and an explosion is created. That explosion becomes splitting of Adam. Adam, of course, being the first man, which is androgen. Adam is then split. Now two are there. We call them male and female. Yeah. And then from there, through their conflicts, more energy is created to drive the chariot of this beast. So at this point, I'm not pulling the chariot. I've been pulling the chariot for 8, 9, 10 years. I suggest we stop pulling the chariot. Surely what could happen after that will not be worse than what's already happening now, seeing that our children are being hijacked. Our children are lost. We can watch them right now. Like, forget our children. We're kind of lost. Yeah. Grandma's lost. Granddad, our mother, our father, they're lost. So it's not exclusive. We're not blaming anyone for this. I'm just saying, if you're going to get through this and you're going to do something about this, you're going to need this. Like, you're going to need this knowledge because it equals application for you. So the last part of this is, so the Knights Templar, as I was explaining, they now have these Orthodox Christians. They're protecting them. They're protecting them so they can make their passage through the Holy Land. But what they're also doing is using this as the primary reason to go through these people's land and take areas like they're doing even today. But they were beat back. I'll tell the last part of the story. What happened is that they end up starting all these forts. And there's a reason for this. And you can still see a lot of the Knights Templars forts up to date as from normal areas in Europe all the way through passage, all the way into the Holy Land. Knights Templar built forts even 100 feet thick walls on some of these forts. These are master builders. Hello. And in these forts, what they had in these forts were banks. They were also garrisons for their troops. And so as these people are going and making their passage to the Holy Land, what they're really doing is taking these Arab tribes' land. Let's just say it like it really is. These Orthodox Christians that are coming through to see the Holy Land are also attempting to occupy the area like Israel is doing with Pakistan. It's all in Palestine. It's all a political move to attempt to basically dilute this kingdom. But because the root of the magic that these people are depending on actually comes from the country that they're trying to overthrow, Saladin, who's a chief magician, Saladin actually is one of the great serpents. That's what the name means. Destroys these people. And for a time, though, because now you see that they're back out there again. And this time they have more ammunition, they have more magic, they have more power to try to do the same thing that they did before. And I'm not saying that either one of these religions is right or wrong. What I'm saying is, in the end, the people will be the reward. That means you. So I'm not on either one side because I'm not nobody's reward. So think about what happens after this. So now the Knights Templar not only are guiding this passage through into the Holy Land, they're also sewing up areas. They're building more Templars. They're building up more temples and fortresses. They got the Hospitallers with them. More people are migrating in to see this Holy Land where their Jesus has been born, which is a fictitious God that the Catholics created. And then the last little blow comes in. Because so many people are getting robbed by real 1001 thieves, where there's 1001 Arabian Nights and the thieves and the marauders, those people were being subject to them so much that the Knights had a solution. If you deposit your money in wherever you started, let's say in Europe, you could then get a check, which is where we get the word check from today, from them. And then when you get further into the Holy Land, you can go into one of these fortresses and redeem money from that check, the first bank. People don't realize how crucial it is to have banks and currency, especially in the world today and in the world of antiquity, because you can't just go out. Everything is not for free. That's the feminine cycle. That's over. They decimated that. Now everything costs. So you don't have credit cards. So you need to carry all this gold because there was no fiat currency. That didn't make any sense. The Knights Templars invented fiat currency. So before then, you had big bags of gold. And if you were going somewhere like the Holy Land, this is how you reverse engineer it. You got a month of caravan travel. So how do you, so you need camels, you need wine, you need oil, you need salted fish, you need all these different things to make this whole journey, right? Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen when you get out there and you're like maybe a little bit too far from home and the 1001 Arabian Nights roll up on you? So that's why the Knights Templar became so powerful, is because they actually created the system of not only money, but they also were working with Diaboli itself, because also with this system of interest, they plunged many of the kings into great debt. Now, these kings really wanted to indulge their pleasures, and I'm going to speed this up. Kings indulged their pleasures. So all these scientific inventions like guns and those kind of things were bought to them by sorcerers who sold them to them by the boatload for things that really had value. Until the point where, like the relics, okay, in countries and people and, people who had clear lineage and all sorts of stuff, the Knights Templar came into possession of all of that. And then they made their greatest blow of all time. They faked their death, which we call Friday the 13th, when supposedly the Catholics, who had no power compared to the Templars, send the Templars to their deaths, call an Inquisition in and torture them and get all, and in their testimony, at least they do admit in their testimonies that the Knights Templar admitted to worshiping Oannes, who is Baphomet, and actually spitting on the cross and having homosexual relationships and all these different things that they themselves admitted to. But this is all a play, because we even see in the Catholic and the Jesuit church today, all that stuff was like commonplace. So what you're really seeing is that they faked that they were condemned from society so that they can disappear. That's how the banksters disappeared. And they said the ones that you did know about were absorbed into the Knights Hospitaller. So they're even telling you, hey, they still went on. They just joined in other groups. They changed their name, and then supposedly Knights Templars never existed again until one day they rise up and they start all the secret societies that we see today. And then their spiritual arm becomes the OTO of the Golden Dawn, which practices a level of magic that is so abhorred, because what they've done is they've gone into Persia and they've grabbed the names and the mantras of entities that I cannot even give you a profile on as far as how much they don't fit into the equation of what we're doing on Earth. Meaning that they've got a hold of what we call sex magic in Tantra of a dark nature. And that's basically necrophilia, having sex with the dead. Hey, that's as far as I can go in that. But if you check it out, you'll figure out this is what's going on. And this is why now every movie you watch, somehow it always ends up taking a turn towards this direction. It's like, just watch what I'm saying. It's like you could be watching a movie and it could just be about something that you would never believe would eventually get to people with hoods on in robes and doing some kind of sacrifice. And you're just wondering, well, wait a minute, I thought I was watching something else and it turned into this. So it's actually all around. And now it's bold now. So it's coming out, it's revealing itself, and it thinks that it has a place because there's so many people who want that fame and power. Now remember, the whole thing to this is this granting of power. Remember the genie, oh, phenomenal, I'll give you power and 3 wishes, etc. So how it's getting a lot of people, look what it did to those that are in Hollywood. And you can see Beyonce's video in a tense, don't watch it, but that's as an example to, it doesn't matter how much money you have. If you get involved in that kind of thing, your brain is gone. You're so miserable. All her whole thing, and most of these people think, that's why they make all these scary movies, and it's because they're miserable. So what they thought was going to be their fame and their fortune ended up becoming a monkey's paw and became their binding. So, but this doesn't change with any aspect of what they're dealing with. So that's also why the money system, right? Because the Templars created the money after a while. And then from there, something else happened that, you know, I guess is the final part of the conversation today and why we should take this serious. Okay, so why should you take it serious? Because inside of the bank, unfortunately, there are, which is the temple, 2-dimensional imprints of agreements, we call them contracts, that one has made with that entity. That's how sneaky it got. It just created banks and it said, hey, if we let people borrow money, then they sign these papers and they say that they're basically indemnified to the bank. Like basically they owe us, but they don't know who us is. They just think us is trading on Wall Street and that us is in a suit and us looks like, you know, what they want to be, the fresh, clean, successful person. That's what they think us is. But no, us is the entity that wants to indebt souls. And that's why their system has got everyone always in the rat race. So someone asked me the other day, and I'll do the favor of answer that question because I said I was. So how, if we have to use this currency, because right now, you know, I had to transact today. How are we ever going to get out of this? It's like crawling before walking. Surely no one can wave a wand around and snap their fingers, and then all of a sudden they don't have to use their name or money anymore. I mean, unless you're ready to check out. You must not have no kids. You must not have no responsibilities. You must have accomplished true freedom. Because let's just face it, the word freedom means no home. It means nothing to be binded to. No wife, no husband, no nothing. Nothing can claim you. That's freedom. So with the person with freedom, please step up right now. Freedom is a word that we use so loosely. We don't even understand the whole universe and cosmos is in order. Freedom means you can go slam into every single planet that you want to slam into if you want to, because you don't have to abide by that order. So what we learn is that there's a power to order of the cosmos. And then what we get to do is we get to expand our orbits. That's what we're doing. We're expanding. So that way and you're expanding through your power that you're trusted with. This is your chakras, your kundalini, your energy, your cleansing, your knowledge. You're entrusted when you have that and you've utilized it properly. You can expand with it, so you're entrusted with more range. This is like giving a child more. Okay, you can stay out later tonight. Okay, you can take the car. So you're giving them more range because they're becoming more mature. That's what the cosmos is doing to us. So when we become more mature, but every time if you get something, you're bragging about it. It's your power now. Now you're better than another person. You're going to end up with less than you had in the first place. So I'm going to conclude this because this is a deep conversation. It gets deep. It's semester 2. Check it out. What happens though is that I just want to talk about this last part, just so you understand that. So the conclusion of it is them in the bank, whatever. Get yourself free of it by crawling before you walk, meaning start devising yourself a system to where you can produce something that is a resource. See, when we're producing resources, that's all our ancestors did. You made something, you made bread, you made blankets, you did something because that was your gift. That was what you had in exchange for whatever someone else was going to give you for their time and energy. You see what I mean? That was the system, but it was seen as gifts, not that you owed a person. Notice the difference. Think about what I'm saying, because I'm not saying, oh yeah, you go to a barter system. No, that's not what I'm saying. It was gifts. And because everything was so abundant, if you have a lot of gifts, and I'm not talking about just sewing blankets, spiritual gifts, how much can you give to someone? A lot. Like, you're perpetual, so you can consistently give. But you also don't give without seeing the results of what you've given. Like, even if you're giving knowledge to someone and that person's running around acting ignorant and you give them some more knowledge and then they're still acting ignorant, how much do you keep giving them before you realize that you've already given them too much? That they can chill on that for a while, go through life, get some real experiences, then they'll come back to that knowledge, see how valuable it was, and then try to make their way back to you to get what's really of value. See, this is how it works. It doesn't, there's a check and balance system in our consciousness. It didn't just come from the banks. It's just they're corrupting it by making an external form of it. And our crawling before walking is first to begin to produce a resource, each person figuring out your unique use in this whole thing, and to begin to work with that. Find your talent, work with that. If it's invention, whatever, work with that. And then finally, if you've truly succeeded, you'll be able to replace monetary systems for at least the people around you, because you can compensate them in gifts for them rendering their gifts. That's my plan if a person wants to know it, and we'll make it open source. So, but at the same time, if you're talking about cutting off money by tomorrow, and that we don't need any money right now, so anyone who would do that would be totally hoodwinked by, whatever was controlling their mind at that point, to think that you're going to be able to get out of this without finding the way to get yourself out of the mire, the step-by-step process. So answering that question. So the last thing, and here it is, and this was a powerful one today. I even feel that.
Yeah.
But the last thing is the judgments. Okay, so just like I said before, that at the end of the day, when I look at things now, I don't say it's good and I don't say it's bad either. I just observe it. I add it to what I know. I calculate it. I put that into perspective and I keep it moving. And the reason why you want to do that is because when you hold on anything and you stick on that, you now put a beam into it. Like you're kind of putting power into it. Okay, even for that moment that you're focused on it, it's giving light to it. Because you could focus on anything. So anything you think about for one moment, you've stopped there to focus, and you're now pushing energy directly into it. So what happens is that the ancients talked about, in order to get out of all of this, to get beyond the rainbow, like I said, somewhere over the rainbow. Okay, so they're really talking about to get over the bridge and to get into the area where there's no scarcity. Okay? To do that, you need to cross the rainbow. And the rainbow, as it's depicted, let's say in this mythology, has 7 colors. Those 7 colors then check out to being archonic forces. Basically, 7 trials that you will need to go through, 7 elements, etc., that you will need to gain the knowledge, wisdom, and experience of in order for you to go through. And that's actually what we're experiencing in life right now in the prism, because we're seeing all the variations that these 7 colors can create, and we're just using those notes or those terms and these numbers just for examples. Okay, so the next level then is what it's explaining to us is that these also are divisions, because we have to admit that anytime we say a word, the whole embodiment of word, thus sound, thus frequency, thus shape, and thus color, because that's the universal language, right, is to divide. And we've now started to learn, just the powers and the weaknesses in division at this point. So we're still like learning. This is a university. But what still happens though is when you say a word, when I say cup, I don't mean dog. So I've divided cup from the rest of all the other stuff. So words are forms of division. That's why they're swords. Same thing with colors though. Words are sounds, really, not just words. They're sounds. Sounds cut. They're not like the other sounds when you make a sound, if that makes sense. So what I'm showing you is in the physical plane, everything is shaping, molding, and fashioning and cutting. So in order to get out of this, you have to get into the ability of not doing that. Now, since shaping, forming, fashioning, and cutting is judging, because that's what you're doing, distinguishing one from another, you have to get into a point where you don't judge. And this is where real power is. That's why they call it Zen. Because now what you do is somehow your mind, it gets into a neutral, not the flow, not to be confused with the flow, but a neutral, to where it's never impeded. So it's speeding through experience, thoughts, and everything so rapidly, it's only gleaming the energy associated with it, not the clip hook, not the drama, not all of the lag and the drag, not the density. You see what I mean? So I'm just explaining where the adept mind is when it's in that stage. And through that, you can cross through the prism. You can leave out of the prism. It never even knows you're there. However, if you come to the prism, the hebdomad, the first gate, and you have judgments, it will not only see you, it will devour you. Because that's what judgments do. The moment you make one, you become, it's like cause and effect. So you get the effects. Listen to what I'm saying. So if you never judge, there's no effects. And what I'm telling you right now is not just in the mind of good people and bad people, but there's also neutral people who know how to do this. And through that, then you can escape the second death, okay? Because since we're studying occultism here, it's important that I explain to you the second death that's being referred to in esoteric lore is the loss of your memories. It's actually a point within all ancient texts when crossing over that they explain that you either become all-knowing, this means you keep your knowledge and then join that knowledge in with all the knowledge there is, or you lose the knowledge. You drink the cup of forgetfulness and then you wander through Styx until you reincarnate. So basically what's being said, to make this simple, because it's not really occult, hidden, meaning hidden, is if you go in and you judge, right away you're going to be wiped based on just those judgments, and then you're going to come back through the whole thing again. If you don't judge, you're now then symbolically merging with everything, right? Because now there's no differentiations. And in that, you not only keep all your memories, because nothing can be taken from you, because where would they put it? But also nothing can be given to you, because where would they get it? You break the paradox. That's the prism. See, the reason why this is so hard for us is because the prism is a paradox. It embodies it. They call it paradise. A pair of dice. It's a parallel. There's another world. Like all of the dualities that exist go on in paradise. Hell was pleasing last time I read about it in the ancient books. It wasn't made to be a place that you knew you were in hell. It was made to be a place that you would forget you were in hell. And that's what I was saying about earlier. Remember the cup of forgetfulness earlier about how what happens here, we really can start to, I'm getting kind of caught up on words, but what happens here is you really can start to see that we don't know what it's like to really be free and really be completely tuned into one another. So we just suppose that because we can use internet and we're not taking mortar fire right now, that everything's gravy and that our life is not worse than those people. But the only way we would know that is if we seen what we were before. And then we would know we're all being cheated. You see? So that's what's up. And I feel like today, see, that brings it up into this point. I'm so glad that I got a chance to have this conversation, because holding all that in is like holding, Kundalini, and you just, you need to transfer it. It's serious. Like that's what we were dealing with during the last conversation. It was, I was just getting briefed by ye old oversoul about, okay, you ready? And it's like, well, surely it can't be you, because there's always this point, and it happened now, but I know that this is not the end, where you feel like, well, man, I can't see what would be like more than this. This is all I need to know. Believe it or not. Yeah, I even do that sometimes when I read a book. I'm like, man, if I just read this book like 3 times, then I'll know like everything. And then there's something back there like, you wish. Because truly, it's like, okay, you're going to get to the next level, and we see you do all the time that same thing. Like the next level is going to be like the grand epiphany, but there's a little bit more that we need to let you know about. Now is not the time, everything in time. And so that's what this is about. So I feel like everyone that's in this nucleus, which is really all of us, is ready for this message, you know what I mean? And ready, because beyond all this, what I see, I call it the day after ascension. Like, if anyone ever asks you about me and I'm long gone from here, just tell them, man, that dude was talking about the day after ascension. He had started explaining everything that was going on for a while on the planet, but his focus remained on the day when all of it would be in balance. Because that's where I'm drawing my energy from. I'm not drawing my energy from the imbalances, because there's no power there.
Yeah.
To me, it's with our connection. But I also, because there's a logical side, I need to know how did it even disconnect? Because I would need to know that first, because I just want to know why somebody would be so stupid to mess up such a perfect system. But it turns out also, when you dig deep, that it's about you going through the experience, not something going through the experience for you. And then at a certain point, it'll click. Like right now, it's clicking for us that a lot of these experiences that we're going through could have been summed up a long time ago if we had connection to our ancestors. And then we start realizing that disconnection between the ancestors is not something that's actually being done by invisible force, but something that's being done, or by an invisible force that's doing it to us, but us doing it to ourselves. Because the moment that we center ourselves, I didn't say open your mind, I said center yourself into your being, then that connection is restored, the bridge. And that bridge, you can then cross it, and then now you're walking through, you're seeing it. And all this is doing, and that's why they call it adepthood, is because it's now starting to allow you to make more sense out of things, like why yellow doesn't want to be purple. You see what I mean? Like yellow is noble. So it's not in yellow's mind to become purple. And it holds up that area like a pillar. See? So when we think about that, and I'm going to show you how does deep knowledge work on a blueprint. So when we think about that, that means that there's a core archon or organ that doesn't want to be the other organ. It's comfortable with being the organ that it is. And it's like a pillar. It will remain as a pillar within our body. There will always be that spleen. You see what I mean? So that there's still power in the absolutes. That's why they say that the absolutes couldn't be chained down. When you read the ancient writings, it says the problems with the archons, and this is all metaphor, was that they were so wild that they would not obey the order. So this is akin to if you try to take a lion and then you got him all in the house and you want him to eat quinoa. I mean, you're going to have some problems. So this means that there's primordial energies that don't have an interest in becoming what you are. They're just holding up their station. And so what we are, because when they show you the symbolism and they start showing you what the humans were, we're the capstone of the genus system. So this means that's why we became the husbands and the wives of the planet, because we know another level of knowledge. It's called cosmic law, that it could be, I don't care what, the most ferocious beast. I pull out a flower. I wave the flower a little bit, and the sheer smell alone of that flower brings the beast into a seat of prostration. That's cosmic law. That's what they're calling science now. Like when you see in nature, like you wave red at a certain insect, and then it starts to flap its wings. It's obeying a whole nother system that when you know about it, then you could have power within yourself. You get where I'm coming from? So there's another level of a certain waft of a smell can change your mind. And it's just when we're dealing in the world of sorcery, they got that sprinkled on your cheeseburger. So you just keep coming back and getting that cheeseburger. Think about what I'm saying, though, that this craft has some strange mechanics to it, and it's become strange to us because we study Macmillan, the books, Macmillan and Gideon, the Gideon Bible, and we study that when we should be studying nature. And so that's what's up. That's it. Like, you can't say no more.
Yeah, I think you said, wow, so much to.
Yeah, wonderful.
Wow.
Oh, no words.
That's amazing that's even on tape.
Yeah. Wow.
Let's hurry up and get this thing together. I got it recording over here, but no, I'm just joking. But they're a little bit anxious to get something because they're like, what's up with you, man?
Yeah, we didn't get interrupted. We didn't drop this time.
Oh yeah, right. It was crystal clear the whole time. We even took a little break.
Yeah. Sounds
All right,
good.
brother.
Thank you so much,
Man,
brother.
Appreciate
Thank you so much.
Much love.
Wonderful. Much love. Have a good night.
Okay. In a minute.
Bye-bye.
We all want to see, we all want to be real, and we're searching when we're finding. We all want to feel the taste of belief, and we search for directions where we meet with our fears. We all want to steer, we want to walk here, even in the hardest battle, face the enemy. Do you feel the grace of fear? There is no need to disappear. Just take fear and get clear. Of fear, there is no need to disappear. Just stay here.